This is Whataburger Friday Night Stars, presented by Game On Sports, live from the Star in Frisco, Texas, and the Dallas Cowboys headquarters. Here's Kyle Yeomans, Zach Walchuk, Eric Chiafalo, and Heckma Harrison.
Good start.
All right, welcome into the Whataburger Friday Night Stars here from the Star in Frisco, Texas. Nick Laupia is here taking over for Kyle Yeomans this week, and then we also have Guy Frazier in the spot for Zach Walchuk, but we do have Heckma Harrison and Eric Chiafalo. The regulars are in here this week. So, guys, let's just get right into it. We got a really exciting week. I already started yesterday with some good games, and the first one, Bishop Lynch and Frisco Centennial, was a good matchup last night to start off this exciting Week 3.
Oh, yeah, a ton of good games Thursday night. Yep. The Bishop Lynch game, Bishop Lynch actually pulled out one in that game, 41-38 for that game. Hey, man, but look, before we get started, I got to go into the fact that you called us regulars. I like that, Nick. But there's a few things that we got to cover with you before we get down to football, man. Now, did you and Guy bear crawl in here from the parking lot? We are initiating guys on this show. We don't just let you on here, Friday Night Stars. There's a few things you got to do before you get on the microphone here, all right?
I'm going to go ahead and say yes, I did.
All right,
bear crawl.
Yeah, I'm just going to say yes and nod my head.
Why do you think Frazier's glistening over there? He's sweating his tail off.
Come on, guys. I mean, it's a pleasure to have you guys on the show. Look, Kyle Yeoman, Zach Walchuk, they had jury duty. I think that's the only way that Fred lets you off work here, right?
There you go.
Yeah, and that's going to be
so.
a bad jury. That is not a jury
I
I would
wouldn't want
trust.
those two on any jury at all. I'm not sure if you could trust either of them.
Not guilty.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry. I
Okay, so there we go. We got that part out of the way. So now a little more into football. Now that Guy and I guess, are officially initiated, I would hope.
I do want to note that at least I think Nick's got the preferential treatment because he at least has the right uniform.
There we go.
He's got the right headphones.
Well, Guy
shows up in here.
Well, he was doing his bear crawls. He kind of ruined his game on shirt, so that's why he had to.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if he had earned one yet. I thought that was the thing there.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Well, look, welcome. Awesome. And I'm looking forward to a good night. Nick, I'm sorry I took over for you right there.
You're
so
good.
Let's get down
to it,
man.
Get used to it, Nick.
I was warned before. I was called last night. I was like, watch out for Heckma. He's going to throw some haymakers. So I'm ready. Hopefully I'm ready for it. I don't know. We'll see until we get the first one. Yeah.
Keep your head on a swivel now.
All right, so we got that part out of the way. Guy and I, the new guys in, but we have Bishop Lynch, Frisco Centennial last night, starting off our Thursday night recaps.
Yeah, it was another big Week 3 Thursday night matchup where Lynch, took it out 41-38 with a big win over Centennial. It was really a high offensive game, but really both teams getting it done different ways. There's 850 total yards of offense with Lynch doing it on the ground and then Centennial through the air. What do y'all think? What's y'all's initial thoughts?
Well, anytime you see a team like Centennial rush the ball for -4 yards, I think that's going to stand out.
That's the one thing of the stat of the night that I wanted to ask about. How did that happen? Is Bishop Lynch, that defense that?
I don't know. I mean, that's an impressive stat, and I think the other thing that kind of went with that is a one-possession game in the end, and Centennial gave up the ball 4 times for 4 interceptions. That's big.
We talk about moral victories. I mean, that's sloppy if you're Centennial, but I mean, if you run the ball for -4 yards and then you also have 4 turnovers and you only lose by 3 points, I think that's a decent outing. But obviously, it's not very disciplined. It's sloppy football from the turnovers perspective, and then you just got to probably take your hat off to Bishop Lynch in that defense. Anytime you stop a team and they're running -4 yards, that especially in a time now where you have quarterbacks that can run, and not only and most teams now have 2-3 backs that they depend on, and we got jet sweeps, and we got all kinds of different ways to run the ball, and you get -4 yards, that's certainly not a great thing. But you only lose by 3 points. If you're Centennial, you're like, geez, we were right there, 4 turnovers, we couldn't run the ball for anything, and here we are, it was a one-possession game.
Right.
It is only a one-possession game, but it's Week 3. You expect to see maybe a little more consistency. You talked about the -4 rushing yards. Are you worried at all if you're Centennial with the, like you said, the sloppy play going into Week 3? You think everyone's already kind of tuckered into that offense and defensive system, and it didn't really look that way for Centennial.
Well, I think Week 3 is kind of where you learn about, or I think this is kind of where you learn what your team is. I think you need a couple of weeks to kind of figure out some data points on who a team is at this point. Now, obviously, a team can change their trajectory and finish strong or dive bomb the rest of the year. But I think after 3 weeks, you kind of start to get an idea of who a team is. And, obviously for Centennial, you got to sharpen things up going into the next week.
And that was another big thing. There's a lot of penalties on that Bishop Lynch side. 8 penalties for 65 yards, but they still end up with the win. So good win for Bishop Lynch defensively. Like you said, held them to -4 rushing yards. That was very impressive. Now we go on over. I know this is a big game for you. Northwest taking on Grapevine, you being the Texan alum.
That is correct. Last night was not a great night for my Texans. Guy Frazier was there on site in Grapevine. How'd you like that new stadium, by the way, Guy?
Oh, it was sweet. It was, it still felt like the old Mustang Panther, but just obviously remodeled and a little fresh, upkeep around the place. It looked good.
Only been played in what? Was that the second game there? Is that the second or third game
I believe so.
ever there?
It was for sure the first game for Grapevine, and if Colleyville's played there, I'm not sure.
Yes,
but they have. Okay, well, that was the first game for the Mustangs in year 100 of the program. It's their centennial year, so it's a big night for the Mustangs.
Well, it was also a big night for Caleb Tejada. He ran for 184 yards, and he was really the MVP of the game for Grapevine. It was kind of a sloppy night for Northwest. They had a bad snap that cost them 2 points early in that game. They got down 9 points, 9-0 early on.
Mm-hmm.
They stormed back a little bit. Austin Ahmad made some plays, scored one on the ground for them. But overall, I think, and you said it, Guy, you were there. Austin Ahmad, the guy who last year 41 touchdowns, week 1 got off to a slow start, but last week sort of picked up where he left off last year. And then he had kind of a down night last night.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was around 50% completion percentage, and not all of it was his fault. There was a lot of drop balls on the Texan receiving corps' part. So that's something they're going to have to kind of sharpen up as they head in the district here within the next couple of weeks. But, you think about they've dropped 3 games now to start the season. They were a 10-3 team a year ago, so they've already matched their loss total from 2018.
Yeah, well, there's a big void left on that offense. Last year, it was Demarius Hosey, their running back, who went on to play at Montana State, and he was really, really awesome for them last year. And that production that leaves that offense is huge. Their offensive line's a little bit younger this year, so I'm sure Ahmad's not getting quite the same amount of time in the pocket that he was last year. And then that defense as a whole, there's really only 2 guys that are coming back that are noteworthy on that defense, and they are good players, but the rest of those guys are really, really young. So and we know how the Texans really benefit from a soft district that they're in and the schedule that they have. I mean, the next 7 games for Northwest are going to be pretty easy. And not even that, these first 3 games were hugely difficult. Grapevine hadn't got off to a great start up until last night. But Northwest, they benefited last year. And I know they went pretty deep into the playoffs. It was the deepest that my school's ever gone into the playoffs, and it was only 3 rounds. But so they beat some good teams last year, especially in the playoffs at first, second round. But they benefit from a soft schedule.
Yeah, I tell you what, man, I really enjoyed the interview that you had with the kid Tejada. I mean, his energy was just coming through there. He's just one of those kids that kind of has that magnetic personality.
Yes.
And I agree with you to a certain extent about teams having I get their true colors coming through by week 3, but then you start to see what the teams really want to do. And Grapevine is a team that has had some really good quarterbacks and have been able to throw the ball successfully for a number of years, but to see them change the dynamic now to being a primary running team with Tejada, and that kid did not disappoint last night.
Well, and he comes from a good lineage of family members who have played football. You've got Ranthony, who played at TCU, Raleigh, who's at Baylor now, and they're Frisco Centennial guys. His cousin Ridge Tejada last night for Centennial had 7 catches for, I think, 100-plus yards of receiving.
Holy
3 touchdowns.
smokes, man. The Tejada's dominating
Hang on,
Texas
I'll
high school
add that
football.
he blocked a field goal or an extra point as well. So, I mean, the man was on fire.
Family.
Yeah, it was a football family, and his brother Seth is running track at UTA now and was a good player for the Mustangs last year. So the Tejada family is one that many
Tejada
people know in the
DNA.
DFW area. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some good genes right there.
Yeah.
So, Texans fall. And again, back to the defense. I think the offense was okay last night, but the defense, anytime you give up only almost 400 yards in passing and almost 300 yards in rushing, you pretty much got dominated. And I think that's really the problem for Northwest right now. Their offense took a half step back from last year. Their defense took a couple of steps back.
Right.
Well, and talking about rough games for the defense, North Crowley had a tough task yesterday going up against Denton Geyer, and they fall big time to Denton Geyer. Another huge win as Denton Geyer's off to a 3-0 start, and, well, they've just looked dominant in every of their games so far with a 55-7 win last night.
Yeah, Denton Geyer is starting to look scary good. With the first win over Alito, and none of us picked him. All right, so that's to be noted. None of us picked them.
Nope. It was my only loss that week.
It is, but they are starting to look good. And just going back to the game last Saturday in the Cotton Bowl versus Cedar Hill, I mean, Eli Stowers, Kedrick Cobb, and Seth Metter, these guys are putting on a show every week. And the thing about Kedrick Cobb that I think that has to be noted, and we're looking at the rushing yards. Kedrick Cobb had 101 yards, 226 of those rushing was another 70 or 80 was from Eli Stowers by himself. This kid is comfortable in this offense, whereas last year he didn't look very comfortable. But talking about that game versus Cedar Hill and all of the athletes on defense and offense that Cedar Hill has, Kedrick Cobb is the type of running back that when you look at the game over 4 quarters, by the time we get to that 4th quarter, guys are trying to duck down and get out of this kid's way.
And he's doing the opposite. He's looking for contact.
Exactly. But the thing is that last year, he was one of those guys that really kind of took unnecessary punishment. He didn't have to. He had 3 or 4 guys dragging on him. That's where some of those injuries came from. But now you see him with a mean, stiff arm. And, hey, if he get 2 or 3 guys on him, he go ahead and get on the ground, But I start to see those kids MOPing, missing on purpose. They want to get out of Kedrick's way because he's coming. 3 touchdowns, 101 yards, 10 carries, and they literally pulled him off last night.
I was about to say, there's no way he
played
him off.
4 quarters. They pulled him off. I mean, it was 55-0 all the way through the 4th quarter, and they gave up a touchdown with like 12 seconds left in the game. So they were pitching a shutout through it. But I'm telling you, they have a few more games. They got Keller Central next. But then the game after that versus South Lake Carroll,
October 4th.
Yeah, that's my game of the week.
You gotta circle that on the. You gotta circle that because Denton Geyer is looking scary, man.
Yeah, they're looking incredible
too.
Yeah, it's at CH Collins,
which is really big.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. You mentioned it last week. I mean, this isn't their most impressive win of the season. This was their easiest game. I mean, this was sort of a tune-up game before their bye week, before Keller Central, right? So this isn't the most impressive we've seen them, but it is nice to know that they get off to a great start, 2-0. They got tough teams. Alito, no one thought they were going to win. They sort of shocked the world. And then last week, we're still kind of wondering, all right, was that sort of a fluky game here? You got back-to-back tough games. It's Cedar Hill. It's not at home. It was over at the Cotton Bowl last Saturday.
10 a.m.
Yeah, 10 a.m. starts, so it's a little bit different. And what do? They come and they dominate. All right, and then this week, this was their easiest game of the year. You got the bye week coming ahead. This is an easy one of those games to sort of not be focused. And they went in there, they put it on them, they put it on them quick, and then their starters got to hit that bye week about a quarter and a half early. So it was a great win, great start to the season for Denton Geyer. And you said it, Heckma. Against Southlake, October 4th. That is going to be, and Guy, you're going to be there. That's your game of the week. All right, so we're going to have incredible highlights from that game. That's going to be a blast.
Well, and one thing I'll add is, these first 2 weeks were definitely battle tested with who they were playing, but it's the games that they were playing too. They're both really close ball games, if I'm not mistaken. Geyer won the last 15 seconds last week. So when you look at that, they're battle tested and they know how to play in games like that. I think that's big for Stowers at quarterback, where last year's kind of feeling himself out.
Very inconsistent, up and down.
A little bit of a roller coaster, but this year now they're 3-0, and he's also battle testing some games where it really kind of probably tested his mental later on in the game.
Sure.
So now when he plays a team like Southlake, I think he's feeling good about himself and knows that I can handle those situations.
As he should. I mean, Stowers, like I said, and especially when you're looking at the RPO, he has that run pass option. It's the option is to put it in the guy's belly or take it out and actually throw. The offensive linemen are doing the same thing every time, no matter what the play is. And so Stowers is just so much more comfortable in the way the spacing that they've created. Coach Walsh is just doing a really good job with these kids.
Yeah, it's basically starting the season like 2 playoff games for Geyer. So when they get there, when it's first round of the playoffs, they're going to feel like they've already been there, done that this season. That's going to be huge.
So how do you stop these guys? Because you look at Stowers last night, 10 of 18 for 188 yards, a touchdown. Then you have Cobb's 101 yards, 3 touchdowns, 10 carries. They can beat you either way, and it's going to be hard to stop really either one of those aspects. How if you're opposing defense coming in, how do you try and stop the combination of Stowers and Cobb's?
Well, you got to hit them in the mouth. Yeah. You can't be scared of them, and you got to make sure that you get Kedrick Cobb on the ground. Also, you got to score points because they're going to score, and Alito is a team that you saw in the first week. Alito's going to put up some points. And so if you can do that and you can stop their run, because they do everything predicated off of the run. Look, Kedrick Cobb is the octane for them. If Kedrick, as they go, as he go, basically is what I'm trying to say. And so that's what you got to do to stop Geyer.
And one other name I want to throw out for them is Grant Mahone. He's one of our next 25 guys in the offseason. He's a defensive tackle for them, Oklahoma State commit. And he's a guy also that, look, I know we talk a lot about offense because that's what the stats are. They get put in the newspaper and all that. But that's a guy on defense that can maybe come up big in some games like the South Lake game and farther down the road in the playoffs.
Yeah, that defense, that's a pretty stout defense as well. You're looking for that Denton Geyer team. All right, so those are the first couple of games to get through. We're going to take a quick break here. Coming up on the other side of the break, we'll talk about some more games that happened last night. We also have a great show coming up later at about 5:45. We'll have the old coach coming in, give us a little bit of the statewide view, so don't go anywhere here on Friday Night Stars.
Gear up for Back to Sport at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
It's game day. A day that should be spent in the living room, not the kitchen. So next game, you just worry about the score, because we've got the food covered. With hand-battered, cooked-to-order, always fresh, never, ever frozen chicken fingers, craveable cane sauce, crispy crinkle-cut fries, and jugs of freshly made tea and lemonade. Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers, one love.
Go Cowboys!
It's in all of us, and we won't hold it back. Not one little bit. Nope, we embrace it, letting it fuel our passions, pushing us deeper than we thought possible and keeping us curious. It's what sets us apart from the herd. It's how we come up with the ideas that make people say, why didn't I think of that? See, when you nurture the creativity and passion that's in all of us, you'll learn nothing is out of reach.
Get excited, Whataburger fans. Our one-of-a-kind mushroom Swiss burger is back.
And now it's an all-time favorite.
If you love mushrooms, you're going to love this burger.
The double cheese, the mushrooms was absolutely amazing.
It's a really good balance between the mushrooms and the Swiss, and that au jus sauce on top.
The creamy au jus sauce.
It really complements the mushrooms. Everything just works perfectly together.
It's just perfect. Every bite's perfect.
It's not just a mushroom Swiss burger, it's a Whataburger mushroom Swiss burger.
Hey, I'm Jack. We started SeatGeek because we want fans to have a better, more transparent ticket buying experience. With SeatGeek, you can see the best deals and buy tickets, all with a price match guarantee. The only thing we can't guarantee is that your team will win. So use the code TICKETS20 at checkout for $20 off your first order.
All right, welcome back as we are at the Star in Frisco. Friday Night Stars, an exciting week 3 of action all across the state of Texas. We had a couple of the big games last night, already previewed that. A little bit later on in the show, we'll preview some of the big games that are going on tonight, including, I know, Heckma, you're excited about the Highland Park Frisco Lone Star game at Highlander. That's going to be a lot of fun. We could probably do a whole 30, 40 minutes just on that one.
Oh, we might. We got Guy Frazier in the building. He is a Scotty at heart. He bleeds gold and Navy, and he would much rather be at Highlander right now than he would be here. And that's a fact. And
I got questions.
Fine. I'm not salty about it.
We're not going to do it. I'm not going to do that to the show. Chris will hear him in our ear, but we won't do that.
That's going to be a good one. That's going to be a good one.
We got a lot of good games. Lake Dallas, Frisco, Reedy here at the Star later tonight as well. But those are a couple of the games we'll get into a little bit later on in the show. But we have Thursday night kind of went and gone. We went through those games, and we have old coach coming in here in a little bit, talk about the statewide view. But other kind of notes or I guess, really headlines that you guys saw throughout this upcoming week in terms of high school football? Anything that kind of jumps out at you going into week 3, these Friday night games for Texas and just anywhere in the state?
Oh my God, man! You talk about the matchups that we have going this Saturday. Also with Duncanville playing a school from DC. You have some show and prove games with Prosper versus Flower Mound, and so it's a ton of matchups. Even the South Oak Cliff Wilma Hutchins game. I mean, South Oak Cliff is due for a feel good game, but you never know. I mean, if Kyle Douglas Jr. Is back in the building,
Not sure.
I mean, he's a kid that got carted off a couple weeks ago, but man, there are a ton of matchups going on this week.
Yeah, and it's not as sexy of a matchup it maybe as it would have been in years past, but when you have two blue blood programs in the state of Texas, being Odessa Permian and Southlake getting together, that's always just a fun sort of nostalgic vibe. Southlake goes to Odessa to take on the Permian, and that should be just for nostalgic reasons. I think we can all get behind that one as well.
Well, and even just forget the nostalgic part, while that's important, think about when DeSoto went out there a couple years ago and they kind of struggled. I think that long type of drive all the way out there, kids aren't used to that at the high school level, sitting
Agreed.
on a bus or any way of just, transportation that long, more than probably 2 hours or so. So, well, I think Southlake's probably the much better team. I think sometimes those games you can see the DFW teams kind of come out a little slow and let a team like Odessa Permian or Midland High, teams in the past that have played us when we've gone out there, kind of stick around longer than maybe what's expected.
And we saw that happen, vice versa with Permian coming to town. Wasn't it Trinity? Didn't they come play Trinity?
DeSoto 2 weeks ago.
Or it was DeSoto 2 weeks ago. Okay, and it was the same thing for them. They got off to a slow start and really got dominated in that game. But anytime you got to travel in a big yellow school bus that far, that ain't great for anybody.
Right.
Yeah, so we got some exciting games tonight, and then tomorrow we also had a few other games last night. We'll go ahead and take a look at some of the other scores from Thursday night. We'll start off with Carrollton Creekview and Irving Nimitz, as we see there a 21-12 win for Carrollton.
Yeah, absolutely. Carrollton getting the job done. I think that the game that sticks out for me, obviously, Heckma, I'm sorry, the wife probably didn't go to bed too happy last night with her Naaman Forest squad losing 31-0. But Northwest Eaton is a team that I got to spend some time with this summer. It's a great group of guys, and it's just cool to see them. They're 2-1 now. They got off to a pretty nice start. They got some seniors on that team that are really, really good. And Oscar, I got to remember his last name.
Moore.
I'll find it here. Oscar Moore. Thank you, Guy Frazier. The encyclopedia of all things Texas high school football. Oscar Moore, that is a name to know. When we get back doing these player spotlights, I'll spend a couple of minutes talking about Oscar Moore. The dude's an absolute man beast. I wonder if Chris Beam back there on the Beam Cam has any idea about him, because I think he's going to go to Baylor, but the dude is a stud safety. He's chiseled. He looks like a linebacker, and everybody fights over him because the linebackers coach wants him, the safeties coach wants him, the receivers coach wants him, the running backs coach wants him. Everybody wants Oscar to play. The dude was out with a forearm injury all summer long. He showed up at the end of summer workouts the last 2 weeks. He looked like he'd been working out twice a day for the last 10 years. I mean, the dude,
Oscar the Grouch.
He's just an absolute beast. I think in the first game of the season, he had a pick six for a touchdown. The dude's just an absolute stud. So it's nice to see my Northwest Eaton fellas out there getting a nice victory, even though it is at the cost of Heckma Harrison's morale.
Hey, man, look, Naaman Forest is one of those teams that have historically come from behind. They're just like that, Seabiscuit team. They like it that way, starting 0-3 in district. So they'll be all right.
I mean, this is nothing new for Naaman Forest, right? They're going to go 0-7. They're going to win their last 3 and figure out a way to make the playoffs.
That's what they
it's
do.
Brilliant.
Well, let's be easy on the Rangers too, because it's a new coach this year. So
isn't it always?
Well, so it's going to take some time. It always does. Year one's going to be rough. We'll see.
Absolutely.
Well, year 4 was rough for the last coach. So, it's just a cycle. I'm sorry. I love you. Go ahead, Nick.
Well, I was going to say another score that jumped out 65-0 Hillcrest over Conrad last night. I don't think you see those kinds of scores very often. Usually there's at least both teams score at least 3 points. But 65-0, again, not something you see a lot in Texas high school football.
Yeah, it'll happen. You get a dominant enough team, and they'll run away with it. And they obviously had the clock rule, and the clock was running for those guys. Because otherwise, we might have saw 100 points last night in that game.
Right. Yeah,
so
them and North Crowley both would have lost by about 150
it got ugly
points.
fast. So good for them. But yeah, Nick, that happens quite often. They'll keep that clock running so the kids don't have their morale just completely destroyed by 100-0 loss.
Well, and if you know anything about those two schools, I don't know how much of a rivalry it is now, but when Conrad first opened, a lot of that was because of alleviating the overcrowding over at Hillcrest. So the schools aren't very far from each other. So that's, I don't know how personal of a game that is now, but anytime you get beat 65-0, you're not feeling too good about it after.
Oh, absolutely.
No, that makes for a bad Friday, man. It really does.
Yeah, not a fun day at school.
You got to wake up Friday morning and go to school. You don't even get the 2-day weekend to just make sure everybody forgets about it. It's Monday. Hey, we're on to the next one, baby. Yeah. Nuh-uh, it's Friday, and we all were there, bro. You got smacked.
Well, the week before, Hillcrest won 69-0 against Sunset. So Hillcrest putting up a ton of points early on, 2-0 for them. So a couple of impressive scores so far for the Panthers.
Yeah, they got a couple feel-good games going for themselves. Let's not fool ourselves. I mean, when you get a Florida Atlantic and a FAMU on your schedule, it builds all your morale. Shout out to Florida A&M and FAMU and everybody else.
Got to have a tune-up game or two, fellas.
That's the one. That is the one.
All right, so kind of other things looking forward into tonight or tomorrow. We got a big game again tonight here at the Star Lake Dallas Frisco. But before we got into the Thursday scoreboard games, we were talking about a couple of the other things going on. But right now we do have a special surprise. We have Zach Walchuk on the line here. So I think he got out of jury duty a little bit to talk to us.
Yeah.
Hey, Zach, how's it going?
Hey, what's going on, Nick? Is that the running bit that's going on?
Yeah. Did they select you for jury today?
There's no way.
Yeah, man, I got selected. I'm going to be stuck here all night.
That is.
It's a crazy murder trial, boys. I don't know how they picked me. I tried everything I could to get out of it.
We don't know how either.
Yeah, I'm stuck.
All right, Zach. Well, hey, man, we're missing you on the show, but I got to know, what are you most looking forward to on this Friday night? I know you've been studying your playbook over there. You can't get away. Look at you. You're back home again, so you got to tell me something.
Well, I think the two games that I'm most intrigued by, Prosper at Flower Mound. I think that it's a great measuring stick game for both of those squads. I think for Flower Mound at home, when you got Blake Short and Pierce Hudgens offensively, we know that they're going to be putting up points. The question is for Prosper, can they go ahead and keep up with that Flower Mound offense? And then the other matchup I think that everybody's looking at is Frisco Lone Star and Highland Park. And for Highland Park, I know you guys are going to go into getting your predictions later on. I've left Guy with mine, so I'm sure Guy will handle those beautifully.
Predictions? Guy has your predictions.
Guy has predictions.
And they're beautiful predictions, too. I agreed with every single one of them. So
thank you, Guy. I appreciate that. But everybody in the state, I'm sure, will be watching that Frisco Lone Star Highland Park game. Last year, it was a defensive struggle, 10-7. HP got it done. But and I'm sure you guys have noted it, they haven't lost at Highlander since 1998 to a Texas opponent. So for Highland Park, they don't lose at home. I think this is probably going to be their toughest test in that run with this Lone Star squad coming in, but I just don't personally see Highland Park losing at home here tonight. A little bit of a spoiler for the prediction games ahead.
There you have it. And we know, at least we know which way you're going.
Chuck, I do have this question for you on that. I don't expect it to be a 10-7 ball game like it was a year ago, but I also don't expect it to be this high-scoring shootout that a lot of people are talking it to be. What do you think?
I think that it probably will be, maybe a 20-17 kind of game. I don't think the field goal kicking is as good as it was last year for either of these teams, to be honest with you. But when you look at it, I think that Frisco Lone Star's quarterback situation might be a little bit better than it was last year. Obviously, Marvin Mims is finally getting the attention that he deserves going to Stanford. I thought he was probably the most undervalued wide receiver in the state last year. And Chandler Morris was really held in check. But if you remember, he was really kind of getting his footing as a starting quarterback this time last year. So, with a full season and a state championship under his belt, I think he's got more command of that offense than ever. And we didn't see Chandler use his legs a lot in that matchup. I think this year you will see Chandler Morris in games that Highland Park needs him to run. That's when he's going to use those legs and exploit a defense. I think you'll see Chandler get it done on the ground tonight.
Tomorrow night, Zach, we got a couple of good matchups. We got DeSoto and Dunn, and then we got DC St. John's coming down to take on Duncanville. And either one of those two games stick out to you?
Yeah, I think both are fun. I'm interested to see if Bishop Dunn can play with DeSoto. You know, we know that DeSoto's got athletes. We know Dunn always brings a great defense to the table. Can they slow down that DeSoto offense? Because that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to try and run the ball, shorten the game. I don't think they can keep pace offensively with DeSoto. So if they want a chance to win, that's going to have to be their strategy. I think defensively they've got the talent. I just don't know if they can withstand that offensive barrage of the Eagles. And then for Duncanville, you know, these kind of country matchups are always fun. We got to hold it down for Texas. You know, Allen's usually the team that's doing it for us. This year, it's Duncanville. And you have a team that's nationally ranked coming in at St. John's, and really I think a lot of us are probably a bit foreign to what they're going to bring to the table. But it's going to have to be that big Jaquindon Jackson game, Heckma. This is going to be it. Last week I said I think it's more of a Tristan game, and he came out and had that big run early, set the tone. This week, it's going to be Jaquindon Jackson. He's going to have to be Superman for Duncanville.
Yeah, and last week, Jaquindon Jackson, by stat-wise, had a horrible game versus South Oak Cliff, so he's definitely going to have to turn it around for the Panthers to get a victory tomorrow.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that they shut down their starters pretty quick against Sauk. You know, I don't think anybody besides you thought that Sauk would be able to play with Duncanville.
Well, thank you, Chuck.
And Duncanville proved that pretty quickly. I don't think those starters played a whole lot last week, Heckma.
Yep. I'm pretty sure Jaquindon was either taken out at halftime or shortly thereafter halftime. So
there you go. Guy knows.
You know, look, that game got lopsided fast.
Hey, Walchuk, we got a nice game tonight as well. Bowie and Rockwall. Do you have any faith in Bowie? They've kind of had an easy schedule thus far. Now they got to take on a Rockwall team. Do you have any faith that Bowie could go on the road and take down a Rockwall team that's averaging 55 points a game?
Yeah, you know me, and I've always liked Arlington Bowie. I don't know what it is as a kid growing up. I don't know if it was the uniforms or whatever it was, but I always just kind of enjoyed watching Arlington Bowie play. And historically, I feel like they've always had a mobile quarterback that's quarterbacked that offense. I just don't think they're going to be able to keep pace with Braden Locke in that offense. Rockwall is one of the best, most explosive offenses we've got here in the state of Texas. And I think that maybe Bowie can keep it close for the first half, but eventually you will see Rockwall pull away. It'll be interesting. I mean, that would be a statement kind of win for Bowie to go on the road and play with Rockwall. But I would be shocked if they're able to pull that upset.
Yeah, this is a guy named Njiba that's over there.
Yeah, Jackson Smith. We're just going to skip the Njiba part.
Yeah, we're just going to – it's just not going to happen. I mean, and so Braden Locke is a sophomore that's amazing. And up until this point, based off of his stats, I just don't see Bowie doing it. And Bowie is a team that obviously coming into the season lost a lot of their seniors. But that is going to be a good game because they do have a bunch of defensive studs. That's one of my games, so I'm not going to give up all my nuggets right now, Walchuk. You're not here.
Well,
so.
You know, and Heckman, tell me if you agree. I think for Bowie, if they're going to win, it's going to have to be a similar kind of cowboy formula that we've seen. Different to this year because Kellen Moore's taken over the reins, and now it's an explosive offense. But previously it was all about let's run the football, let's shorten the game, and play good defense. I think that's what Bowie's going to have to do if they want to have a chance against Rockwall.
Well, they have a quarterback that's very mobile, and he does everything for them. And so the one thing that you do know about Rockwall up until this point, that they are, especially versus Highland Park, they gave up a ton of yards. And so it's yet to be seen. But the one thing that we do know is the big playability for the Yellow Jackets is there.
Well, and I'll piggyback on this a little bit because I saw Bowie week 1 against Flower Mound Marcus, and Bowie is your standard tough team that they have been in the past. There's a bunch of junkyard dogs. That's kind of what Bowie is. But there's a nice little tandem with Dravon Ponder, the quarterback that you referenced, and then Jimmy Valson, who I know we talked about week 1, who had a huge game. He did it again last week, and he's actually picked up 2 Division I offers since then. This kid that's kind of blown up this year. So I think you're going to have to see a lot of Dravon Ponder and Jimmy Valson tonight if they want to have a chance against Rockwall. And what might be a game that gets, if you're going to stay with Rockwall, you're going to have to score points. I think those two are going to have to be pretty effective.
Yeah, we'll see pretty early in that one if Bowie's going to have a chance. You know, after the first quarter, you look up at that score and we'll know.
Right.
All right, Zach. Well, you're 9-3. You're second in the rankings.
Who's won? Who's first?
I believe Mr. Chiafalo over here, 10-2.
Really? I thought he had a bad week last week.
Right here it says 10-2. You're 9-3. You, Kyle, and Heckma are all tied at 9-3.
Man,
so.
I'm gonna regret.
Whoa! Wait! Stop talking! Stop talking!
What do you have to say,
Nick? What did you just say?
Well, I'm just saying it was you, Kyle, and Zach are all tied at 9-3.
So Chuck, stop talking like you on top. you get on my. You really
Whoa,
is getting on my nerve with this, man. Hey, Chris, would you hang up on Chuck, please? I mean, I want to get on with the show, man. I can't take this, man. I can't take this, man.
All right, real quick before you get hung up on, though, are you going to be out of jury duty by next Friday?
Yeah, I'll be back next Friday, boys. Don't you worry.
All right, perfect.
I love you. Love you.
Love you. Take care, boys. Have a good show.
Again, that's Zach Wolchuk. I think they're on recess right now, so I think he was able to get there.
He went for a snack break, you know.
Okay, all right, so the real question, so he said he gave Guy his predictions. So do we count that for Zach's totals this week, or should Guy start his own category?
I think I might throw my name in the hat anyway. But
you don't want none of this.
I do.
I like that.
We live rough over here.
Y'all don't
man.
want me.
So when we do prediction games, Kyle gave you his predictions to make as Kyle, or are you doing predictions as yourself? Nick
predictions is me. He didn't give me predictions.
He didn't give you his predictions?
He did not. No.
But Walchuk gave Guy his predictions. Because Walchuk takes this seriously. He's a true pro.
Let's talk about this. If Kyle did not turn in his predictions, then that means he's going over on everything.
I think and you know what? That's a shame because he went 7-0 last week along with
Kyle sent his predictions in our FNS group text, so we've got him.
Oh, that's right. He did text us his.
Okay.
So
remember,
you better say something.
He had some controversial picks in there too. I'm gonna have to get on him about.
He did. He jumped out of the gate. Yeah. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
He got a Scotty all riled up.
All right. Well, there we go. So we'll figure that a little bit later on, though. But again, congratulations. You went 7-0 last week, Heckma, on your predictions.
Hello.
Not bad. Not bad at all. So real quick,
you're gonna have to go 7-0 for the next 7 weeks.
You only got a one-game lead. It's not. You're not too far up there.
It'll be 2 or 3.
A broken clock is right twice a day.
That speaks to your week last week.
All right, coming up
big
here.
Thursday game though. I do want to mention Longview, 42-0. Guy Frazier. What did you make about that? John Tyler, not the same team.
Not the same team. They graduated. I think either all of their O linemen or 80% of it. They graduated 2,000 yards worth of rushing last year. They graduated both their starting wideouts in Keandre Street. And I'm drawing blanks on the other kid. He was also a college-level player.
I'm disappointed.
New quarterback. Really, on defense, they may have gotten better from a standpoint of going into the season, what people thought. But I kind of saw them taking a step back. They've got Kenton Crawford, the Texas commit. But as far as a
and he
whole,
played lights out.
Yeah, he did his thing. But I texted ahead of time to all of y'all and said that Longview might win this thing by 50. I was close. They won by 42. So, and I'll also say I think it's the first shutout that Longview has had over John Tyler since 1977.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on the year, but sometime in the 70s. So it was an impressive win. And Haynes didn't even play well last night for his standards. But when you get the job done, you still put up 42 points.
No. Let's back up a little bit here because they only threw 3 interceptions all year last year.
Right.
I think he had 3 in the first quarter.
And I think in the game last night.
Well, and Heckma's a little bitter because Haynes almost took his hand off.
No, so let me tell you something. He threw a ball last night that went into the sideline, and I shook a little bit. And I said, you know what? There's something mentally wrong with me when I see a kid throw a ball to the sideline. And look, let me tell you the backstory. King threw a ball in the state championship last year that the kid threw a dart. Skid off the turf, and Chiafalo's face was right in the way of the ball. It was going to knock his glasses off and break his nose. I stick my hand out like a good parent to stop your son from getting hit by a foul ball. And this kid...
he throws darts.
And my thumb, he stomped my finger, man, and I'm telling you, that thing was swollen for a month or 2.
Oh, that ball was humming.
It was humming. So
you saved my face, you saved my life.
Hey, man, when he threw a couple balls last night, I was like, I don't know how these kids are catching this. And they're talking about he needs to get to Texas A&M and get on the weight program. I tell you what he can do.
He's gotten bigger, though.
Yeah, but he can throw that rock.
He can throw that rock. And he can run, too.
The game was on ESPN2 last night. Yes. You got to wonder, maybe, he was on the big stage.
It's a lot of pressure.
Did he start freaking out
It's a lot of pressure. And then when you see the week before Preston Stone do what he does in a high-pressure moment like that, there's a lot to be said about that because there are a lot of eyes on you.
Well, you got to think they still won by 6 touchdowns. It wasn't his best game. I know his dad is probably going to be hard on him next week in practice, but you get out with a win. That's all that really matters. And they're moving on. They're 3-0.
Yeah, so that wraps it up for the Thursday night games. Coming up on the other side of the break, we'll have Nick Harris from the old coach.
The old coach?
He'll give us a little bit of the statewide perspective, so don't go anywhere. Stay with us here on Whataburger Friday Night Stars.
only Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I ate a lot of meat. They showed us commercials. Steak. That's what a man eats. Selling that idea that real men eat meat. Serious man food. But you got to understand, that's marketing. That's not based on reality.
I've been teaching fighting techniques to government agencies for more than 15 years. Then, I got injured. Unable to teach for at least 6 months. I spent more than 1,000 hours studying science on recovery and nutrition, and stumbled across a study about the Roman gladiators.
The gladiators were predominantly vegetarian.
How could the original professional fighters be so powerful, eating only plants?
When I made the switch to a plant-based diet, I qualified for my 3rd Olympic team. I broke 2 American records. I was like, man, I should have done this a long while ago.
When I went plant-based, I wasn't sure if I was going to survive. And I actually became like a machine.
One of the biggest misconceptions in sports nutrition is that we have to have animal protein to perform at a high level. That's just not true.
Sometimes you have to do things that you know your competitors aren't doing.
Today's blood and yesterday's blood.
Yeah. I think this is going to wake a lot of people up.
I was recovering better, not getting as sore. This was our best season in the last 15 years, and we had 14 guys on plant-based diets.
We all want to feel great, have more energy.
Cholesterol was 276. Today, 169.
Whoa, now you're talking.
Most guys my age can keep up with the grandchildren. My grandchildren can't keep up with me.
It's not one set of dietary guidelines for improving your performance as an athlete, another one for reversing heart disease, reversing diabetes. It's the same for all of them.
Someone asked me, how could you get as strong as an ox without eating any meat? And my answer was, have you ever seen an ox eating meat?
All right, so coming up here a little bit later on, we'll have the prediction segment of tonight's big games. We'll see if Heckma can dethrone Eric Chiafalo for the #1 spot. We'll see if Guy can make his name on the board as well. We'll see what Walchuk's predictions will do. But right now, it's time to bring in Nick Harris from the Old Coach. Welcome in, Nick. He's going to bring us a little bit of the statewide perspective because it's kind of changed a little bit since you were last here.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of things have changed. First, we can talk about Katy. They came up to sorry, mic's not working. Katy, they came up to the #1 in the state in our rankings. They overtook North Shore pretty hard in the Thursday night of Week 1. I honestly think they're a better team than Duncanville right now. We have them #1 in our Old Coach rankings right now, and Ronald Hobbs has come from South Carolina. Dutch Fork came and played Allen a few years ago when Kyler was there, if y'all remember, and gave them a run for their money in Week 2. And that was the year that Allen didn't have their stadium up, and so they were at Kimbrough, I think. But Dutch Fork came in. Dutch Fork, great program. And for Ronald Hobbs to be able to come from a storied program like that on the East Coast to Katy, he already had some notoriety with him, and he's been running all over the 2 opponents that they faced so far, North Shore and Atascocita, both top 10 ranked teams in the state. And they went on the road both times and defeated them. So I'm pretty impressed with Katy so far.
You mentioned Duncanville. Do you think Duncanville is still the best team in sort of our Dallas area here?
Yeah, absolutely. For 6A, absolutely. Or overall, absolutely.
What about Allen? Where does Allen fall for you?
You know, Allen has kind of surprised me. I thought they would have an off year, which I shouldn't think, but
shame on you, Nick.
Yeah,
come on. You know they get to play at home every single week, Nick. I mean, it's an advantage.
Yeah, they have reloaded. They have not rebuilt. And Raylan Sharp, I'm pretty impressed with him so far. I'll be honest with you, Raylan Sharp, I thought you were a track star, not a quarterback, and he has impressed me, and I think he has solid potential at the quarterback position. And Allen overall, they've had 2 very solid wins. Last week, even against Dickinson. Dickinson's a great Houston area team, and a 14-point win, even at Allen Eagle Stadium. I think it's pretty impressive for a team like Dickinson that was coming in there with chip on their shoulder, wanting to knock off the Giants.
Yeah, when you talk about Katy, I had a question because you guys cover a lot of those teams down in South Texas that we don't know a lot about. We don't hear like North Shore. We didn't hear a lot about them into the playoffs, and then they came into the AT&T Stadium, and we're like, whoa, look at these
grown
guys.
men,
grown
left
men,
and right.
And so for you to say that Katy is that team coming out of the South, but Galena North Shore obviously are going to see those guys again.
Yeah, Galena Park North Shore has had kind of some discipline issues with their team so far in these first 3 weeks. There's been a lot of rumblings about Zach Evans at the running back position having some issues with the team and whatnot. But what we do know is that Demetrius Davis is still playing really well at the quarterback position. Still only a junior. He still has 2 more years to go, and he's kind of leading that team right now. And I think he's pretty impressive so far. But by the time the playoffs come around, I think North Shore will be the well-oiled machine that we know them to be. Yeah. And that North Shore Katy matchup in the playoffs will probably be pretty solid.
Now, stepping down to 5A, you are the guy that told us about Braden Locke. We had no idea about who this sophomore was, and literally we had our questions coming into that game versus Highland Park, and you were the only one to step out on the ledge and pick them, Rockwall, to beat Highland Park week 1, and it ended up being an historic game as far as stats. Where did this kid come from? You got to tell us more. I mean, come on now.
What I've heard from Braden Locke, I graduated in Rockwall ISD, so
that's what it is.
Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is.
Before we get to Braden Locke, why are you guys called the Yellow Jackets and your color's orange?
Well, he's a Heath.
I went to Heath.
Yeah. Oh, you were Heath. Okay,
I can't test for that.
Very good.
Yeah, I was about to say
Thank you. Thank you.
I heard the legend at some point, but I don't really remember it. But we always gave them tough for it too.
Yeah, I mean, I was calling them the Orange Jackets on this show all year last year. I'll probably bring it back, even though I got a lot of love for them.
I mean, even on their jerseys, they have angry orange, like the new ones that they have. So.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Good look.
I need to ask Coach Webb about that, actually.
Please, and then
I'll bring that
back
next
Yeah,
week.
thank you.
You can't be serious.
But Braden Locke, like I said, I heard about him in the 7-on-7 circuit, and I heard about him in the offseason. And honestly, I went to go see him in the preseason, and he looked good. He had nice mechanics, good frame already for a sophomore quarterback. And if you throw a good frame quarterback that can throw the ball in a Rodney Webb system, he'll most likely succeed. Yeah. And that's exactly what we're seeing with Braden Locke so far.
So I don't want to go back up to the 6A level like we were talking about, but is Shadrack Banks hurt right now for North Shore? Is that a thing?
am not 100% sure about that situation. North Shore is very closed door.
That's what
I've heard. And I don't blame them. They're very closed door with how they operate things behind the scenes. And we haven't seen Shadrack. We've barely seen Zach Evans here and there. Right. So it's kind of like a don't ask, don't tell type of thing at North Shore.
Okay, I respect that.
And then.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so across the state, are there any other players that might be under our radar but are due to have some breakout games coming out?
Speaking of tonight, Garrett Rangel for Frisco Lone Star quarterback, another sophomore. He took over for a starting quarterback for Frisco Lone Star. That's a Nevada commit. Tore his groin, and so Garrett Rangel's had to step into the scene a little bit, and he's proven his worth pretty well too. Him and Braden Locke are kind of in that same conversation when it comes to sophomore quarterbacks that have been pretty fantastic so far. So I'm excited to see him tonight and see what he can do.
And you're going to be there live on site. Do you have any you got a bold prediction for us? I know last time you picked Rockwall.
Jump out of the cake. Do it again,
Nothing bold. I got Highland Park by about 13.
13.
Dude, okay, let me ask you why. What? Because this Frisco Lone Star team seems like their defense has picked up right where it left off from last year, and then their offense, now they have a quarterback who you just mentioned who's really, really surprised some people. So what makes you think that they would lose by more than, remember, because last year was just 10-7. They only lost by 3.
And I'm going to kind of disagree with Guy on this. I think it will be a high-scoring game. I think it'll kind of be in the 40s and 30s. And I eventually think that Chandler Morris and Case Savage and those offensive weapons that Highland Park has, I eventually think they'll outdo them in the later half.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
I'm all right with that. I don't have any issue with that.
Well, the thing that I see, and obviously you know your stuff. So, but have you had a look at Frisco Lone Star's defense?
I have.
Okay.
Yeah, I've also had a look at Highland Park's offense.
And I'm gonna talk about that.
I mean, you guys got to tell me something because
Chandler Morris, and you're in Highlander. I mean, and Randy Allen. I mean, that's all you need to know.
Who has Lone Star's defense played with a pulse yet?
Yeah, it's
this is the first test
to 3.
Tonight. Now I get when you 3 points through 2 weeks. That's impressive. But you're about to play an offense that is light years ahead of a Richland offense.
Light years? Really? Did you pull out light years?
Yeah.
Light
He's
years.
getting scientific. I
right. I mean,
that guy.
okay,
so
leave
me hanging.
There we go.
You're going to try and compare Richland and Denton to the 3-time
love
state
it
champs
how
in a row.
when Highland Park plays, all of the logic in football goes out of the window. We start saying words like light years and things like that.
Well, you have to remember, you're talking to a...
I know who I'm talking to.
He's a football scientist.
I will backtrack 2 weeks ago. I was very anti-Highland Park in week 1, but they surprised me and they proved me wrong. So
Look,
I can't do it 2 weeks ago.
If you're still letting Highland Park surprise you, I think it's on you, Hector.
There it is. Then it's on me.
And you're a fan. I know what you say off camera.
So here it is. I believe the problem is that you have to understand for Lone Star's perspective on defense, they have a guy, Torrin Pittman, 6'4", 200 pounds. He's not only a offensive a linebacker, he also doubles as a defensive end. He causes a lot of problems for any quarterbacks that likes to get out to the flat, anything deep third, which I know that Chandler Morris likes to do. Everything in Allen's offense is timing, bang, 8. That's where he wants to do. He creates his space that way. So the problem is that you take 24 forward, he's going to be spying everything that Chandler Morris is doing. And so the running aspect of it, if he does step out of the pocket, there's going to be a headache waiting on him because you have that linebacker spying on him. And the difference is also the front four for Frisco Lone Star. They're not shabby either. So when you start talking about teams with pulses, yeah.
Well, and Lone Star has it. I'm just saying, as far as offenses that they've gone up against so far, this is really going to be their first test. So I think you can look at what they've done. It's impressive. But I think tonight is really the first data point where you can be like, yeah, this is the real test.
Okay.
Morris already has 600.
So I'm not saying that they can't do it. I think tonight, though, we learn a lot more.
Morris already with 687 passing yards in 2 games.
Insane.
That doesn't even talk about the rushing.
229 rushing yards on 26 carries in 2 games for Chandler Morris. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough task.
Chandler Morris is unconscious. This kid, I mean, literally what he's able to do, throw guys open, and the athletes, with what he does more with less than I think with anyone, it's the scheme. I mean, to me, Highland Park, I would love to just be a part of the preparation. You know, if you look at teams like, if just not to compare them to a professional team, but the only team I can think of is the Patriots because they're so very well prepared. They're everything that they do is not, they don't self-inflict anything on themselves. The penalties, the way that they scheme for teams, they have a different speed for every team that they play. It's like when they step to Rockwall, they had a speed for Rockwall. You know they're going to have something that we didn't think about would be an element to the game versus Lone Star. But I just believe that for the first time, they come up against someone that has that element also. Like you said, the sophomore quarterback, Marvin Mims, this kid is outstanding. Maybe he's not Jackson Smith.
He's up there, though.
He's up there. He's pretty close. And they have a relatively sturdy running game. But where I think the rubber meets the road and that makes the difference in this is they have bona fide dogs.
But you're acting like Highland Park doesn't on defense.
But they have one.
I don't know about that. I think they have a bunch of names that people don't know yet.
But I don't know. I mean, the
so
guys with pulses.
Eventually,
I'm just talking about the one guy that they have that I know is for real. But so they're gonna show me.
So don't worry, guys. We're gonna get to this game in its entirety a little bit later on.
Once we bring the security guard.
Nick, I want to get it back to you because we only have you here for so long. What other kind of maybe notables to watch? Maybe any upsets alerts or what's there to look for this weekend throughout the state of Texas?
Tomorrow, again, I'm going to be at St. John's in Duncanville. This is a very intriguing game that it's kind of hard to predict just because these two teams are so different. And it's I saw somewhere this week a media outlet put out that it's the most unique high school football game of the year anywhere in the country.
Wow. And you know why?
It's because these out-of-state opponents of this caliber don't normally come to Texas. I mean, the last time we saw something of this caliber was when Bishop Gorman came and played Cedar Hill in 2016, I believe, right?
Yep.
And it's been 3 years since that. And St. John's, nationally ranked team, nationally stout. They had 6 D1 starters, 4 on the defensive side. Let's see, Mikhail Sherman, number 14 overall in 24/7 Sports, a Georgia commit. He's at linebacker. They have a wide receiver that's an LSU commit, number 19 overall. And so it's going to be a very big test for Duncanville. Yeah. And, you know, Duncanville arguably is the state's best right now. So it's Duncanville speaking for the entire state tomorrow. The entire state should be behind Duncanville tomorrow.
Well, I think it's interesting, too, because you've got a school that's a private school. It's a college prep school.
Exactly.
So they play in parochial leagues. So they, typically at those schools, and I can't speak for St. John's, but I have a feeling that they're able to recruit kids a little bit.
Absolutely.
So now you're going up against a public school, and that was kind of the thing at the end of last year. Is a lot of people wanted to, and I was one of them. I wanted to claim that North Shore Duncanville State Championship game is kind of the national championship, because I like watching public school ball. But then you had St. John's, and I can't. Was it the California school?
Modern Day.
Modern Day, it was someone who was up there, and they were ended up being crowned the national champion. And my opinion was, I mean, that's fine. They are what they are, but they're playing on a different playing field that they can recruit kids in. So I think that's kind of the interesting thing about tomorrow is you've got a public school going up against a college prep school that's playing a little bit different, playing level as far as what they're able to do with that stuff.
Yep.
And I think that's just kind of an interesting story that's maybe not being talked about as well.
Well, here in the state of Texas, we have the best athletes. I mean, that's an argument that is going to go on in locker rooms forever when we talk about Florida, Texas, California. And so a team from D.C. coming down here and playing, I'm really interested. I mean, one of the things that just saying Georgia, LSU, so they got some SEC guys. So you know what that means, big and fast. But
the whole package.
The whole package. But Duncanville isn't short for talent,
No question.
So
No question.
they are going to. Tristan Smith last week proved, even though we heard from Coach Samples that he is a little bit banged up, that the kid is obviously a force behind that Duncanville offensive line. So this is a very intriguing matchup, like you said, very unique for Duncanville to take on a school like this, but early game. So I'm interested because I didn't know a lot about the team, and everything that I tried to see about them, it literally was just blowout games.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely interested to see how they match up.
They are coming off a loss last week against a prep school in New Jersey. It was on ESPN. It was a nationally televised game, and it's just curious to see how they bounce back from that, and especially having to travel all the way to Texas. I mean, there are already some factors that are playing against St. John's immediately that we might need to take into account, but I still expect it to be a pretty good show tomorrow.
What type of game are you expecting? Is it, you said contrasting styles? Does St. John's do something offensively? Do they run sort of an Amish style offense with wishbone type of things? Or
I am more impressed by St. John's defense. Like I said, 4 D1 starters on that defensive side, 2 in the secondary. So Jaquindon Jackson is going to have to win this game, and I think this is a huge game for not only Jaquindon Jackson but for the Texas recruiting. Because if they can get a baller like Jaquindon Jackson already signed and on national recognition and on this stage like this, I think this would be huge for Texas football recruiting on a national scale.
Well, I think it's big for just Duncanville as a brand at the national level for high school football. I think this is the type of game where if they go out and win it, they can kind of put their print on that and say we're legit. I think North Shore's kind of already proven that, and they're kind of a name that everybody knows. But I think Duncanville with a win tomorrow kind of places them in that rare air for high school football around the country.
Yeah, and that upper echelon for sure, because tomorrow would be a huge win for the program, and even if they could pull it out by like 2 scores, which a score prediction, I just don't really know, just because these two teams are so different and they come from different backgrounds and whatnot. So I'm just very intrigued to see what we see tomorrow.
Looking across the state, really at any level, is there 2 sides to this? Maybe an overrated team that everybody talks about that you think is maybe not as good as people think, and then an underrated team that no one really is hearing about last year? I mean, locally we had a couple of teams, the Flower Mounds, the Birdvilles of the world, that kind of shocked the world a little bit. Is there a team on both sides of that, really, in this area or in the entire state?
Yeah. I'll start with underrated. I got to see Fort Bend Travis last week take on Richmond Foster. They're both in the Houston area. Richmond Foster, pretty solid team. They have huge guys up front. One of them, Ruben Fothery. Yes, he's 6'6", 320, I think, right up front on the line. He's a monster.
Freak show.
You can pick him out like when they're in a crowd. Like, oh, there's Ruben.
One of the top linemen in this class.
Yeah, and Fort Bend Travis went out there and handled them pretty good and took control in the second half and didn't let their foot off the gas pedal. And they have a wide receiver at Fort Bend Travis, Parker Washington, the brother of the old coach, Ashton Washington. So a little bit of family ties there. But Parker's a fantastic talent at the wide receiver position. They also have a very underrated quarterback at Fort Bend Travis.
Now,
Eric
Parker's
Rodriguez.
going to Penn State. Yeah,
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and Eric Rodriguez, quarterback at Fort Bend Travis, very underrated in my opinion as well. So I think Fort Bend Travis can make some noise in 5A. I really think they're pretty stout in that Houston area. And the underrated teams around here, like you said, Flower Mound, they've surprised me. I think the Flower Mound and Marcus game is going to be pretty great. It's going to be a great game.
And they got a good one tonight against Prosper.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to sound partial here, but I think Rockwall Heath is actually turning things around with that program. New coach Mike Spradlin, he's come in, and they've had 2 pretty convincing wins so far. I mean, last week they had a double overtime win against Wiley, and it was kind of sloppy in the second half. But week 1 they had a pretty convincing win, and I'm curious to see how they match up against Rockwall in a couple of weeks, because I expect them to be 4-0 going into that game.
Speaking of Rockwall, before we let you out of here, they play Bowie tonight.
Right.
Do you think Bowie's got a shot to hang with that offense that we know puts out, and they're averaging almost 55 points a game?
Yeah, I think so. I think they have a chance to hang with them. I think anybody would have a chance to hang with Rockwall right now just because their defense is a little questionable. But I think Rockwall takes control in that second half and makes some adjustments. I think in the first half you might see some surprises and a surprising halftime score, but Rockwall and Rodney Webb, they'll make some adjustments and run away with that one.
Yeah, Coach DeArmond, like you said, he's got a bunch of junkyard dogs. It's just going to be a speed game, though, with Braden Locke.
However, next next week against Arlington Martin.
That's an
That's a
interesting
different
game.
question.
Heck yeah.
That's a completely different scenario.
All right, well, there you go. A little bit of a look throughout the state. Nick Harris of The Old Coach, thank you so much for coming in. Coming up on the second hour of our pregame show, we preview the big slate of games this Friday and also Saturday. And then I believe you got to head out to Highlander. We'll see if your prediction comes true. Maybe a 13-point win or
Yes, sir.
Yeah, all right.
Yes,
well, there we
sir.
go. Nick Harris of The Old Coach here on Friday Night Stars. Don't go anywhere as we'll preview tonight's action on the other side of the break. Stay with us here on Friday Night Stars.
Hi there, this is Dak Prescott. When it comes time to shop for my tailgate favorites, I go to my stores, Albertsons and Tom Thumb, where they offer fresh organics and large assortments of local produce and sell only USDA choice meats. Get 10% off of your groceries every Dallas Cowboy game day when you wear your Cowboy jerseys. Albertsons and Tom Thumb, the winning combination and the official supermarket and pharmacy of the Dallas Cowboys.
Gear up for back to sport at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
Ashley Home Store, the #1 furniture and mattress store in America. We have all the major mattress brands at a guaranteed low price. Plus, we have furniture for every room in the house and decorator accessories to make it yours. With multiple locations, personalized service from knowledgeable associates, and convenient finance plans to fit your budget. Ashley Home Store, the official furniture store of the Dallas Cowboys. This is home.
I mean, if you haven't thought about switching to Geico, frankly, you're missing out. The mobile app makes it easy to manage your policy, even way out here.
Your marshmallows.
Get digital ID cards, emergency roadside service, even follow. Whoa. Oops. That cheeky little thing got away from me. My bad.
Geico. It's easy to manage your policy whenever, wherever.
Can I trouble you for another marshmallow?
Get excited, Whataburger fans. Our one-of-a-kind mushroom Swiss burger is back.
And now it's an all-time favorite. If you love mushrooms, you're going to love this burger.
The double cheese, the mushrooms was absolutely amazing.
It's a really good balance between the mushrooms and the Swiss, and that au jus sauce on top.
The creamy au jus sauce.
It really complements the mushrooms. Everything just works perfectly together.
It's just perfect. Every bite's perfect.
It's not just a mushroom Swiss burger, it's a Whataburger mushroom Swiss burger.
All right, it's time to get into tonight's action. We have a lot of big games. Also, we have the Frisco Lone Star Highland Park. We almost previewed that entire game earlier with Nick Harris.
It's done.
Eric, I think we might have, when we get to that game, we might have to hold these two guys away from each other. They got a little heated there, and that's not even during the full kind of forecast of that game. That's coming up a little bit later on, but I guess we'll go ahead and get right into it. First game we have previewed here, Allen and Coppell, I beg your pardon. That's going to be a fun game tonight, and that's at that almost what would be a college stadium pretty much in any other state. That's at Allen tonight.
Yeah, as always, Allen.
As always.
Playing at home.
As always.
Now, do you guys have any idea? I'm sure Guy does. The last team to beat Allen in the regular season?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I have.
Well, context clues. Thank you, Harris.
I guess it would have been. Yeah.
Lob it to me.
Yeah. And what year was that? 2012.
Wow.
All right.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah. I actually graduated high school in 2012. That was quite a while ago. But that game was at Coppell. This is now in Allen, and Allen's probably going to smack them pretty hard. I'm sure they're going to figure out a way to make that a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. This was the last team to beat us, even though it was almost a decade ago. We will go in with a little extra for this Coppell Cowboys
Have
team.
we figured out the quarterback situation? Because Schumann wasn't playing last week at all. He didn't make the stat sheet.
Yeah, Ryan Walker seems to be like they're going a little bit back and forth. Schumann stepped in this year as a transfer, and we thought, okay, he's gonna be the guy there. He hasn't gotten off to a great start, only 83 yards and a touchdown. Not sure if he's been banged up or not, but Ryan Walker's actually been a little bit of a better player, gives him more of a running opportunity there offensively, and he's been better, 137 yards, 2 touchdowns. Neither one of them been great. The Coppell passing offense has not been overly great there, but bottom line is this is going to be a team that is going to take a loss tonight to Allen. Between the stable of receivers that they have with Sherfield and then the Green brothers, Blaine and Bryson. Those guys are only juniors. They're both 6'2", 200 pounds. They're big-time dudes, and they all average. Sherfield's averaging 21 yards a catch. Bryson Green averages 15 yards a catch. These dudes are big play guys, and I think the thing about Allen is their defense has really stepped up. Their run defense in particular has been really, really awesome. They've given up 75 yards a game on the ground, which is really, really fantastic, and their pass defense has been a bit suspect, but this is a nice game to make your pass defense feel good going up against a Coppell team that doesn't throw the ball overly well. So I think the big thing with Allen is they're going to stay on on sort of par here, and they're going to go out and probably do what they do against most teams. And I don't expect Allen's offense to have to play much in the second half. None of their big dogs, Sharp and all those stud receivers. And let's not even forget that they got Keldon Manning at running back. And the other guy they got is Jordan Johnson, who has stepped up in a big way for them whenever they're giving Manning a breather. So obviously we know how Allen is. They got reinforcements left and right defensively. Remember, they only had one starter back. That's linebacker Jaden Healy. And he's led that run defense being really, really good. So overall, Allen probably going to get the big-time victory today. And that Coppell defense, they've played solid, but even they only have 2 starters back. So they got Walker Polk, who's a stud linebacker, and then Parker Odette, who's really good on the D-line, but otherwise they're extremely young on that defense, and I'm pretty sure Allen's going to go out there and put it on them pretty quick.
Now, you have some insight on Schumann. He's
a former Scotty.
Yeah, tell us about him.
No, well, him and Chandler were in the same grade, I believe, and were competing at one point, and eventually he went to Jesuit. But, their freshman year, I believe the story went that Schumann and Chandler were both competing, and let's say, it's a 10-game season. The first 5 games of the season, Chandler was the freshman A-team quarterback, and Schumann was playing up on the JV team, and then they flip-flopped at the second half. And I want to say Schumann at one point maybe got injured. Chandler got a little separation between the two and never really looked back. He became the backup for John Stephen back in 2017, and then last year obviously got his chance to start, and they won the state championship. So, Schumann went to, Kevin went to Jesuit and had an all right year last year. I didn't realize he was at Coppell now until last week when Wolchuk told me that.
Yeah, and Coppell is a team that has historically had a lot of beef up front on the defense, but they have graduated a ton. Don't really look for Allen to slow down. We had a lot of questions going into week 1 because we didn't know a lot about the team because of the law firm from last year graduating.
That's right.
And this team, and they just don't look to how they find these. I guess they got 10,000 students. They can just pick somebody out of a crowd and say, hey, come play quarterback. But it is just amazing to me, even on the defensive side with a bunch of guys that we didn't think would be there, they are shutting guys out. So it looks like they're on that run, but how they do in the playoffs and getting into district play is going to be very interesting because Prosper and a lot of those other schools are, they're gunning for them.
Yeah, and I don't think this game has the juice that it has had in the past couple of years, nowhere near it. But I think the interesting thing about this Allen team is they've come off to a really impressive start with Cedar Hill win and a Dickinson win. Those are 2 really good wins. Mm-hmm. And coming into this season, this team was getting a lot of comparisons to the 08 team that won the state championship, but that was kind of one Allen team that, obviously accomplished that with a bunch of guys that people didn't know as much. There was a lot of guys that names, there was no Kyler Murray type name being thrown out there. But, you look at this team, they still have talent. That receiving core is really talented. Keldon Manning, and then Raylan Sharp, who they call Lil Kyler.
Yep.
I actually got to see a little bit of his footage from last week. It was the first time really me getting to watch him. That's a really appropriate nickname for him because he really does look like Kyler out there. Just even the way he moves and slings it, he kind of has a quick throwing motion. And then you look at his wheels, like I was just looking at the Cedar Hill game 2 weeks ago. He led the team in rushing, I believe. 9 attempts for 134 yards, so he's averaging 15 yards a carry. So he's just as lethal on the ground as he is in the air.
Yeah, and this has been a really big play offense. I mean, I said it with their receivers. I mean, Sherfield, 21 yards a catch. The Green brothers are both at about 15 yards a catch. They've been big play. And you talked about Raylan Sharp, the first play of the season. He had an 80-yard touchdown run on the ground using those legs that you were talking about. So they're a big play offense. And another thing about Coppell, even against Saxey, who is not even close to as good as Allen, Coppell forced 3 turnovers in that game, still lost it. So this is not a Coppell team that's going to go out there and really make this a game. I bet it's over by half.
So that one starts at 7 p.m. at Eagle Stadium. Then we have Euless Trinity versus Colleyville Heritage, another 7 p.m. start at the Mustang Panther Stadium.
Yeah, I tell you what, man, Colleyville Heritage and Coach Joe Willis is a great coach in North Texas, but Colleyville Heritage played a forgettable game last week versus Southlake. I'm sure that's one they didn't even have to put the tape on. 123 yards passing and only 41 yards rushing last week. And so they're coming up against a Euless Trinity team that is very stingy on defense, and they have, what Euless Trinity is going to do. They're going to overly dedicate themselves to a running game, and unfortunately for the Panthers, they give up an average of 180 yards in rushing. So as much as this is, I don't want to call it a must-win game, but it's one of those games where Colleyville has definitely have to put out more than they did last week. Quarterback A.J. Smith is going to have to find his big play receivers in Isaac Chabet and Chad Turner. But everything literally from the start of their season has been running through their offense and running back Ash. And this is a junior running back that's given them a lot. He put in some good work the first week versus Lovejoy, where he had 188 yards, but last week, man, only 40 yards on the ground. And so they're going to have to turn that around. And this is a tough opponent coming into Mustang Panther Stadium. Always has been a tough opponent. I mean, I think they play for the Whataburger, Chris, if I'm not.
Well, it's a rivalry game.
It is a rivalry
it's an underrated rivalry
game. It is, and it's one of those games that I've been a part of from doing play-by-play with Chris Beam, and literally, man, it's a tough game, and Colleyville has matched that intensity. Coach Joe Willis has coached those kids up each and every time versus Euless Trinity because, look, man, Euless Trinity brings in, like I said, a bunch of big guys up front. I don't want to slaughter their names because they're hard to pronounce.
Yeah, please don't.
I won't do it. But they have guys in Marcus Irvin and A.J. Burnett and Zach Moore. They're running backs over there at Euless Trinity. Those guys are maulers.
And Irvin can run the ball too.
Absolutely.
I mean, that dual threat, and he's only going to throw the ball probably 4 or 5 times tonight because that's all he's going to have to do.
And so they're dedicated.
Grind it out.
And they're, like I said, they're overly dedicated to running the ball. And so one of the things that Colleyville is going to have to do is step up to the plate tonight on defense and try to get some stops. But look, this is not a good week for a must-win.
Well, and they have to get stops, but they also have to be really efficient on offense because, with Trinity, they're going to cut the game in half with how much they want to run the ball. So you're only going to get a finite amount of opportunities unless you force some turnovers on defense for your offense to get the ball. So if Colleyville's not efficient when they do have those opportunities, it could be a long night. And you also got to wonder how they're coming off another rivalry game last week against Southlake. So, they're going to have to bounce back this week. But I think that's just a tough opponent that usually, for Euless Trinity, they've, in my experience anyway, have kind of owned that rivalry and just been the more physical football team as well. So,
all right, Keller, Fossil Ridge, Hebron, 7 o'clock at Hawk Stadium.
Yeah, so, look, I saw Fossil Ridge last year, and they were a roller coaster team in 2018. They went 6-5, were a by-district team. And I got to think that Coach Baccarini is going to want to be a little more consistent this year. With that said, they're off to an 0-2 start, but they've lost 2 really good games as far as opponents who they've been playing. There, Denton Ryan and Flower Mound are 2 teams to not really, shake your head about as far as getting a loss against them. It's a good quality opponent. But as far as, guys that are returning for them that I know about, Coleon Evans is a 3-year starter at running back, and I think this is a game that's going to feature a lot of running the ball by both teams. So I think he's a guy to look out for. But I think the key for Fossil Ridge against Hebron tonight will be the 2 big guys up front, and Donovan Westbrook and Jordan Ederson. Westbrook's is actually a move-in from Oklahoma, and Ederson was actually a guy that anchored their front 7 last year, if I believe correctly from when I saw them against Keller. So, you're going to need them to be big against a Hebron team that's going to really want to run the ball with Jalen Lott and Isaiah Broadway. That's kind of their bread and butter. I saw them last week against Martin in what was a highlighted Thursday night game that was very odd. We talked about it.
Yeah, it was a wild game.
Wild game. And, in that game, Carson Harris, their quarterback for Hebron, threw it 31 times, I believe. I don't think they really want to do that. I think they were forced into doing that.
Well, because they couldn't run the ball last week.
They couldn't run the ball.
3 yards a carry.
Right, and when you're down 24-0 at halftime, you're kind of in the hole, so you got to figure out some ways to get some points on the board, which they did. They came out of the half and really hit Martin in the mouth. But I think if you were to ask Coach Brazil over at Hebron what he wants to do with this team this year, I think it is running the ball. So I think tonight it's going to be a run-heavy game between both teams, and I really don't know who I prefer. I'd probably say I would take Hebron.
Yeah, I mean, Hebron just shot themselves in the foot so much last week. And Arlington Martin, we know, is a really, really good football team, but you can't do what Hebron did last week and expect to be able to win games. So, like you said, they're going to want to run the football, and it's just a matter of can they do it. Thank God they got a Fossil Ridge team that is not on the same level as an Arlington Martin.
Yeah, and Isaiah Broadway, sophomore running back.
Yes,
Kid is very tough.
Yeah.
And love the way he runs the ball, but Hebron needs to get behind that if they plan on having any success, like you said, man.
Well, and I was not even aware of Broadway heading into the season. I knew about Jalen Ly's big 6'2" back, and really looks like more like a versatile all-purpose guy that they actually use out a receiver as well. But Isaiah really, I know they didn't run the ball great in that game that I saw last week, but he stood out still, just his body. And, I mean, he's already got offers from Arkansas and Baylor as a sophomore, so I think he's a guy that we'll be watching as his career at Hebron goes on here in the next couple of years.
Yeah, he got on the field a little bit as a freshman last year, too.
Did he?
So the dude's a stud.
All right, and then we have 8:30 here at the Ford Center at the Star. We have Lake Dallas and Frisco Reedy both coming in 1-1. You look at Lake Dallas, a 24-0 win against Centennial in Week 1, then 34-37 loss last week against Denton. You've got to look out for that quarterback, Trevor Moon, 15 of 31, 209 passing yards, 3 TDs. But the big thing, you got to try and stop the run. Ike Onikwe, I believe, 42 carries, 173 yards already in the first 2 games. So that's going to be a tough task for this Frisco Reedy team on the defensive side. And then you have a couple of receivers that can make plays as well. You have Jaden McGrew, 9 receptions, 127 yards, and then Hunter Hope, 99 yards on 7 receptions. And then that Lake Dallas defense already have a couple of takeaways. You have a trio of defensive backs that have an interception, Minor, Hernandez, and Dabney. They already have an interception each. And then you look at Frisco Reedy, first week, a 19-48 loss at the Colony, and last week beating Plano West 17-7. Their quarterback, Jalen Kitna, 22 of 36 so far, 222 yards, 2 TDs, and no interceptions. Then you also have A.J. Padgett you might have to look out for, 11 out of 18, I beg your pardon, then 157 yards. And then their playmaker is Zion Washington, 10 receptions, 166 yards, and a touchdown in the first 2 games. This is going to be a good matchup. You see a little bit of the defensive advantage probably going to Lake Dallas. They forced a lot of turnovers and only allowing maybe about 200 yards a game. So that's going to be a lot of fun to watch against a Frisco team that has had a little bit of trouble putting up some points early on the first 2 games of the season.
Yeah, this when you talk about Lake Dallas, Kobe Minor, the kid is a Texas Tech commit, big-time DB in the state. This kid is literally one of the most athletic DBs.
One of your slept-on guys.
Yes, sir,
Yeah.
and definitely a kid that's very athletic and rangy. He goes both ways, but we don't want to just step over Frisco Reedy because last year those guys had it. You know, they jumped out and they called
Foskey.
And they did so many good things, and to see them get off to a tough start this year is kind of surprising. You said a name, Kitten. I think he's related to someone around here, so I don't know.
A guy named John. Maybe?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Genes.
But I just didn't want to run past that, being that we are here.
Well, and I think we're still
it's a home game for him here.
Yeah,
at the
home
Star.
game. Yeah, I think we're still learning about this Reedy team. They graduate some key pieces.
Absolutely.
Foskey being one of them.
15 of 22 starters.
Right.
Gone.
Right.
See ya.
But they
Bye.
do return some talent. Nate Anderson, who's one of the best offensive linemen from a ceiling standpoint. He's still growing at the position.
And he's got a cool story because he was a tight end that at the
Right.
beginning of last year they said, man, we need you on the offensive line.
lineman as well.
Yeah, and then he turned out to be one of the best guards in the entire state, and
Right.
he's going to go on and play at the big boy level.
And his cousin Jack Anderson, who played at Frisco, as a guy that's been a star at Tech the last couple years. So he comes from good bloodlines. And then you got who's one of my favorite players in the state in Will Harbor.
Yes.
Who's just a do-it-all guy. Yeah. He's a true throwback in that he's going to play a little bit of running back for them. He's going to play a little bit of linebacker, and he kicks the ball. And
plays a wildcat quarterback.
Yeah, he just does it all. So, that's a guy that, they need just from a leadership standpoint and just doing it all as far as, I guess, to alleviate some of the pressure in Kitna as he tries to work his way into this new system. Because I think Jalen was actually pretty effective out in Arizona as a sophomore, I believe, last year. I think he's kind of feeling himself out still in this new system, obviously, with Reedy. But, I think there's still, a bright future on the horizon for this Reedy Lion football team. I think we're still learning who they really are, though.
All right, so that's at 8:30 tonight at the Ford Center here at the Star. Don't go anywhere. On the other side of the break, we'll preview the rest of Friday's matchups, including what's sure to be a volatile discussion about Frisco Lone Star and Highland Park. That game's coming up, but we'll preview that one later on, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on Friday Night Stars.
Hey, I'm Jack. We started SeatGeek because we want fans to have a better, more transparent ticket buying experience. With SeatGeek, you can see the best deals and buy tickets, all with a price match guarantee. The only thing we can't guarantee is that your team will win. So use the code TICKETS20 at checkout for $20 off your first order.
Get excited, Whataburger fans. Our one-of-a-kind mushroom Swiss burger is back.
And now it's an all-time favorite.
If you love mushrooms, you're going to love this burger.
The double cheese, the mushrooms was absolutely amazing.
It's a really good balance between the mushrooms and the Swiss, and that au jus sauce on top.
The creamy au jus sauce.
It really complements the mushrooms. Everything just works perfectly together.
It's just perfect. Every bite's perfect.
It's not just a mushroom Swiss burger, it's a Whataburger mushroom Swiss burger.
It's in all of us, and we won't hold it back. Not one little bit. Nope, we embrace it, letting it fuel our passions, pushing us deeper than we thought possible and keeping us curious. It's what sets us apart from the herd. It's how we come up with the ideas that make people say, why didn't I think of that? See, when you nurture the creativity and passion that's in all of us, you'll learn nothing is out of reach.
It's game day. A day that should be spent in the living room, not the kitchen. So next game, you just worry about the score, because we've got the food covered. With hand-battered, cooked-to-order, always fresh, never, ever frozen chicken fingers, craveable cane sauce, crispy crinkle-cut fries, and jugs of freshly made tea and lemonade. Raising Cane's Chicken Fingers, one love.
Go Cowboys!
I won it.
I can't believe it. That car brought his karaoke machine.
Nothing but a heartache.
No, I can't believe how easy it was to save hundreds of dollars on my car insurance with Geico.
Go, Kevin. Go, Kevin. No.
Believe it, Geico could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
All right, so just a quick correction. Lake Dallas, Frisco, Reedy not at 8:30. That one's starting here at 7. Players already out on the field, got their pads on. They're getting ready to go, and we'll get right back into it. McKinney, Boyd, and Louisville. That's a 7 o'clock start at Max Goldsmith Stadium.
Yeah, McKinney Boyd, man, this is a team. They got off to a slow start last week. They scored 0 points in the first half against Flower Marcus, but they had a solid second half. They had 3 plays in the second half of 45 yards or more. So they did come up just short in the end against Marcus last week, but they did show some signs of growth. They got a young quarterback, Carter Whitefield. He's a sophomore, but the dude's been playing really, really well. The first game was just okay, but last week almost 300 yards through the air. So that was a good stepping stone for him. I think this game in this season, a lot of it is just about the growth of that sophomore quarterback, Carter Whitefield. And their head coach, Joe McBride, I mean, he returns to the sideline after 4 years being the AD for Coppell ISD. So, he's still trying to build that culture. But the good news for McKinney Boys, they had 12 of their 22 starters returning this year. So, and a lot of that comes at the running back position. Tyler Shaw, the dude's a stud, 2 touchdowns last week. They got 3 receivers with at least 120 yards receiving and 1 touchdown. Their top guy, senior Kareem Coleman, The dude's an absolute baller. 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an average of 22 yards a catch so far this season. And their defense, their secondary is Studley. They had the Colleyville transfer, Jake Fex in that defensive backfield. That's really, really good. And then they got 2 first-team all-district guys in the defensive backfield, Jalen Shaw and Alex Taylor. So I like McKinney Boyd. I think they're moving in the right direction. Again, McBride, first year back after a few years being the AD in Coppell. So obviously he's still trying to get that culture going. But I like where they're at. Louisville, they've had a really, really soft schedule. I think tonight will be their first legitimate test against at least a solid football team in McKinney Boyd. So this will be a fun one from a Louisville perspective, see what they're all about. But their defense is, they got the all-state defensive tackle, Christian Versey.
Yep.
That dude's an absolute beast. 94 tackles, 14 TFLs, and 5 sacks last year. So he leads that defensive line. Good linebacker, Luke Halter, 100 tackles, 5 sacks last year. So they get the job done. But again, they haven't really played anybody yet. So it'll be interesting to see, how they come out of the gates against Boyd, who, again, started slow last week, had a strong finish, didn't get the win. But I like where they're headed.
Well, and then I'll piggyback on some of that. I think a name that might be, it's not new to McKinney Boyd because he actually played there his freshman and sophomore year, but it's Play Wyatt, who's a Bishop Lynch transfer. He played his junior year at BL, and then he's actually transferred back to Boyd this year. He's a Rice commit.
Okay.
And he's actually one of our slept-on 60 players that we released this summer, so he's a guy to look out for. And then on the Louisville side of things, we've got Armani Winfield, who's just an absolute stud. He's a sophomore this year.
Yep.
And last year in 2018, he was actually the co-offensive newcomer of the year as a freshman. So, and he's a guy that I know, my Texas Longhorns are really high on. Oklahoma's really high on him. And he's a guy that I don't know, and they're not on my regular season schedule, but if they were to make a playoff push like they did last year, I'd actually like to go see him at some point.
Yep.
Suppose he's the real deal.
Yeah, Winfield is all about that speed.
Right.
But Louisville has a quarterback, junior Talon Green.
Yeah, he's been the man.
And so we talk about, playing against an opponent with a pulse.
Mm-hmm.
I think this kid has gotten his confidence up. And so this is definitely going to be his time to shine. And he's going to have every challenge in front of him today in Boyd because they do have a pretty good defense as well.
Yeah, and that was the question coming in for Louisville this year. Who's going to be, who's their quarterback going to be? How are they going to perform? And Talon Green, the junior's really stepped up. 450 yards through the air, 7 touchdowns, 9 total. He's got 2 on the ground. So Louisville playing pretty well, but again, they haven't played anybody yet, so it'll be interesting to see how they come out of the gates tonight against Boyd.
All right, and then we have Midlothian Heritage at Decatur. Decatur dominant so far in their first few games, and they get to play at home tonight.
Right, and I think this is kind of one of the more slept on and one of the more fun games in the area, if not the state, this weekend. You've got a team that I believe Midlothian Heritage, they fell out of the playoffs last year in the regional final. Then you've got a semifinal team in Decatur from a year ago. Now, if you were to look at this game in 2018, you would say, how is that possible? Because Midlothian Heritage topped Decatur 56-21, but Decatur was one of those teams that was kind of a slow growth team that by the time the playoffs came around, they really started to hit their stride and find some things out on defense. In fact, they started, I think, the year 1-4 and then finished winning 7 out of their last 10 games before running into the La Vega train in the semifinals, which that was lopsided. But for this Decatur team this year, they're very pointsy. They're going to like to put up a lot of points. And they bring a lot of their offensive production back from last year with Roman Fuller at quarterback, who threw for 4,600 yards last year and 45 touchdowns. And then with that, he's got Gunnar Ragsdale, who's got 1,040 yards on the ground last year in 2018 with 16 touchdowns. And he's got 2 receivers that combined for 2,500 yards and 25 touchdowns as well, in Dane Chapman and A.J. Martinez. So the Decatur Eagles really don't struggle to put up points, but they're going to be playing a good offense in Midlothian Heritage, too, who's led by one of our guys in the next 25 recruits, in Jay Wilkerson, who's one of the better receivers that people probably don't talk about enough in the DFW area. So.
All right, no, that's going to be an interesting matchup for sure. And then we have Prosper and Flower Mound, 7 p.m. at Flower Mound.
Oh, what a game! Now, I will say this about Prosper: if you could win the state championship based off of how your facilities look, these guys would be in the state championship every year. Brian Sutcliffe, is a guy that's a big-time Prosper guy. But look, man, when you look at Prosper, Jackson Berry is playing outstanding for the Prosper Eagles. He's putting up a lot of yards, but Prosper has a running back by committee approach with J.T. Lang and Tyler Bailey. And literally, with the turnaround, the Eagles are a team that they're trying to build that program up for one reason and one reason only, and that's to beat Allen.
Well, they're kind of a mini Allen right now.
Well, they're trying to get there, and the thing about it is they can't get too far ahead of themselves, and so games like tonight, they're going to have to prove that they can win those to even be in the same breath of contention with Allen, because again, there's an intimidation factor. But let's not get away from the fact that Flower Mound is a very well coached team. Okay, and Coach Brian Brazil has these guys, the Jaguars, off to a 2-0 start. The guy that is all world is my man Blake Short, the quarterback for the Jags, and literally these guys have the Metroplex on fire. They're just kind of continuing with what they did last year. Both he and our guy
Pierce Hudgens,
and this kid is a stud. He reminds me a lot of the running back for the Panthers, McCaffrey, C-Mac. Reminds me a lot of that guy. Reminds me a lot just how quick he is. He does it on the ground. He does it with his legs. He does it with his hands. Kid has great set of hair. Literally, the kid is outstanding.
Check all the boxes.
Yeah, he's checking off on everything. And what they did last year was outstanding. 4,500 yards for both of those guys, combining for 52 touchdowns. And not a lot is said about the Jaguars' defense. They got plenty of good guys over there in Travis McFarland and Stone Ebby. And so they do it on both sides. But the one thing about Flower Mound that I'm really, really impressed with is, again, very great coach team. They don't commit a lot of penalties, and they play sound on both sides of the ball. And you just can't call them a one-dimensional team as it relates to what Blake Short does in throwing the ball, because they can do it either way.
Right.
All right, then Saxe, Plano East. Saxe 1-1, Plano East not in the win column yet, and this might be a good opportunity for Plano East to get some points up on the board. They're averaging only about 14 points right now. Scored 21 in the first one, 7 last week, but they're going up against a Saxe defense that's giving up a lot of yards per game throughout the first 2 games. But you would go back to Saxe on the offensive side. Parker Wells, the junior quarterback, he's had a pretty good 2 games, 20 out of 34, already 206 yards, couple of 3 passing touchdowns rather, and they have a good rushing attack as well. You have another junior there. They're set up nice. They got a lot of juniors and sophomores on this team. You have Sean Coleman, 42 carries, 213 yards, a couple of touchdowns for him. He's averaging 106 yards a game. But again, the Plano East defense isn't too bad. So this might be really the first matchup that Saxe has to play one of the stouter defenses in the area.
Kind of surprising to hear Saxe in the same voice of giving up a lot of points on defense, because they have prided themselves as a program by having, some pretty great defenses out there in Saxe.
Well, and I actually got to see this Plano East team a couple weeks ago against Highland Park in a before the season scrimmage. And so one thing that stood out to me was Plano East is returning 2 guys total, 1 guy on each side of the ball. So
gosh, that's a recipe for a long season.
20 guys, right? And the one thing that I took from that game is it appeared that the Panthers are kind of going through a little bit of a quarterback battle between 2 guys that, in my opinion, the night I saw them, no one really stood out as far as taking the job yet. So the one guy that kind of stood out to me last year when I saw them in the same scrimmage was Trey Scott Jones, and he's back again this year. He's the one returning starter instead of running back. This kid that's got really good speed. He's 5'11", 195. He runs a 4.4. So he's a guy that I think the Pesh offense should probably lean on this year a little bit, and as a guy that I'm kind of looking forward to seeing, his production, as he's the one guy for the Panthers that, everybody kind of knows from last year. And as far as this Saxe team, Coach Red Barons has just built a consistent program there in the last 5 to 6 years. So while they've had some guys graduate from their impressive defense from a year ago, Coach Barons has built a consistent program, and they should be good again this year.
Yeah, and then you have the Colony, Byron Nelson. That's at Northwest ISD Stadium, 7:30. Byron Nelson looking to get in the win column.
Yeah, and the Colony. This is Walchuk's sleeper team.
I was just about to say that, man. Good thing we don't have Chuck in here. He's so high up on this. He's almost giddy about the Colony, isn't he?
Golly, man, acting like a sleeper team. They made the playoffs last year. They're a sleeper team. Very good. Mikey Harrington, Miles Price, they're a sleeper team. Give me a break.
They're sneaking up on people.
Keith Miller, we'll see him at Colorado next year making plays at the wide receiver position. They're sleeping on us. Yeah, the thing about Byron Nelson, they've been in most of their games. They really have. have, and their quarterback, their running back, and their best receiver are all juniors. Hudson White, Max Modesti, and then Cooper Stillwell. I think all three of these guys, with one more year of experience, next year they're going to come in with three bona fide seniors at their three main offensive positions. I think they're sort of a year away. They have 5 returning on defense. Their best guy defensively is Logan Riojas.
Say it again.
Riojas. And he's gonna have his hands full tonight. The guy to always watch for, though, Miles Price. I mean, bottom line is the Colony on the road. They're gonna get the victory tonight. They're not. I don't think anybody's really sleeping on them other than Walchuk. So I think that Mikey Harrington, the dude's an absolute stud. And then when you factor in a guy like Keith Miller and then Miles Price, who just committed to Texas Tech, I think this week.
Man, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you
No,
off,
you're
but
good.
Texas Tech is building a monster team. May not be a bunch of 5-star guys but as far as the guy, every week when I see a new guy commit to Texas Tech, I'm like, whoa, that kid's a baller.
Right.
And Price is definitely that.
Well, and I think Miles is one of the more underrated. I mean, people know the name, but I don't think people realize how talented he really is. I saw him against Reedy last year, and
he did so much.
And Keith kind of stood out after that game because he was on an ESPN or a top 10 play with his amazing one-handed catch in the corner of the end zone. But Miles was really the guy that stood out to me from that game that night. It was a really good game between them and Reedy, which obviously Reedy ended up being a really good team. So that was a good game by the season's end looking back. But yeah, Miles just, he's 5'8", but he's nothing but speed. And so he's one of my favorite guys. And seeing him commit to Tech this week, it's a good fit for him. And good for him.
Yeah, and he's a guy that dominates all three phases of the game. I mean, he could have a touchdown catch, he could have a touchdown run, he could have a touchdown return, whether it be a punt return, kick return, and oh, by the way, he'll get an interception return for a touchdown as well, like he did in the first game of the season this year. So Miles Price, absolute stud. The Colony, really good football team. They're going to go get the win.
Diverse skill set. It was
no question. Yeah, Swiss Army knife. Offense, defense, special teams. The dude is just a playmaker.
Yeah.
All right, then we go down the road, a 6A matchup, Waxahachie visiting Flower Mound Marcus tonight.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting game. I actually saw Flower Mound Marcus week 1 against Arlington Bowie, and I kind of fell in love with this Marcus program back in the summer because of their 7-on-7 play that they had. Now, 7-on-7 doesn't tell the full story, but you can learn a little bit about a team, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So, I fell in love with Garrett Nussmeier, their quarterback, who's a really big-time pro-style quarterback in the 2021 class.
He's got good genes, too.
Does he?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
his dad, I'm pretty sure, works for the Cowboys.
Okay, well, so Nuss, the one thing that I left 2 weeks ago thinking is I really want to see them kind of air it out more with him. They've got a guy in J. Michael Sturdivant who moved in from Kansas.
Kansas, yeah.
Big body receiver. And then they've got also Colin Sutherland, who's a big body tight end. So they've got some good-looking athletes for him to chunk it to.
Yeah.
That with Marcus, historically, they're known for their running game. And what I saw a couple weeks ago is they really want to make things happen with Tyson Edwards at running back. Now, maybe it was just Bowie out-athleting them up front and kind of bullied their offensive line, but they weren't able to get the production there that I don't think that they wanted to get. And so, with me, I kind of left that game thinking I want more from Garrett and giving him opportunities. So that's something I'm kind of looking forward to watching in this game. And then with the Hatch, they went 1-9 last year. They won the first game, and then they went 9 straight on the L column. So, I think Todd Alexander, was kind of feeling things out first year with the program. It was also their first year in 6A. So I think two things that Waxahachie wants to build on this year is building depth on the defensive side of the ball. For a 6A schedule, it just takes a different level of physicality. And then finding their quarterback spot, which I think they maybe have found in Campbell Sullivan. He leads the team in passing and rushing right now, a little bit of a dual threat. And then they have a good receiving core as well.
Yeah, I think the one thing that happens to teams when you start giving guys stars based off of 7-on-7, what happens is you put 4 of the guys on the field and you can touch them.
Right.
And the spacing is completely different in 7-on-7.
Yes.
A lot of that changes. And so I'm not saying that Nussmeier isn't a bona fide quarterback, but what I'm saying is it comes down to his offensive line, getting him the protection and the timing that Coach Atkinson likes to have in that market. And a lot of it is also predicated on the timing offense that they have. And so they they know they can't do anything if they don't run the ball because that's what defenses do. They just tee off on you because they know what you like to do well. But you have to say something about them graduating one of their top dogs from last year, the kid that went to LSU. But he was Marcel Brooks.
Yes, Marcel Brooks.
Marcel Brooks, and he was a dual threat linebacker and
wide receiver this past weekend.
Absolutely, in that Texas game, he made the stats, made the stat sheet as well. But again, Nusslemeyer is a kid that, like you said, big, tall, strong.
Yeah, he's pretty looking.
Yeah, it comes from a good family of football guys that knows about football.
Be careful.
And
man.
so the thing is that he's going to have to show it, and the schedule doesn't get any easier for Marcus, and so they're going to have to prove it week in and week out, or this could end up being a very ugly season for him.
Well, and it's interesting. We'll move on after this, but you brought up the O-line for them, and that was kind of the one thing that I came away thinking about their offense is I wanted to see them pass more, but there may be a chance that they can't necessarily because he didn't have a lot of time when they did try. He was running for his life a lot, and that was kind of, Bowie showing their bully mentality, and they kind of got the best of Marcus in that game. So, there might be some reasoning with that, too, of why they just can't sit back and just let him sling the rock.
Well, speaking of the bully, I guess the bully in the room is Arlington Bowie versus Rockwall, and that's my game, and I'm really excited to talk about it because I tell you what, Rockwall has an offense that in the last 2 weeks – this kid, sophomore, Braden Locke, has had 951 yards passing.
And one of those games was against Highland Park, which was a shootout.
951 yards passing. And this kid is just literally, I mean, he is lights out on every level if you look at what he's doing. Now, look, I think that Rockwall has a wide receiver that no one in Arlington can guard. I mean, like, period, in Arlington.
Maybe in the state.
Can guard this kid. I mean, he is our Theo Weiss of last year, and he is just getting off to such a great start. And I'm really excited to see what because Arlington Bowie also has some athletes on the other side. You're talking about Jaden Landrum, Jaron Johnson, and also the junior quarterback, Drevon Ponder. And so it's not that they're short in any way as far as the athletic ability, but you just look at what Rockwall does. They do it a lot better, and they have a weapon that is unstoppable, in my opinion. And so I'm looking forward to this game. It has a lot of matchup problems in it, but it's going to be which team is going to be willing to deliver the first blow. And I just think that sophomore quarterback for Rockwall is just playing out of his mind right now.
Well, and I think you get a good receiver duel in this game with Jimmy Valson, who I mentioned earlier. He's a guy that we're going to get to know a lot more as the season goes on. He's picked up a Kansas offer.
He was injured last year, right? I think he got injured most of last year, stepped onto the scene week 1 and was dominant.
Right. And so when I saw him a couple weeks ago, it took 3 plays. I was there with Coach O recruiting. He was like, that guy can play. And what do you know, later in the week, Emmett Jones of Kansas offered him. And the rest of history, he actually picked up a second offer this week from Oregon State. So you get him and a guy that's kind of up and coming versus a guy in Jackson Smith and Jigba that we already know about. He showed the world who he was in 2018. He was actually one. If Chandler Morris didn't exist, I would say that was my favorite player from last year.
Yep.
So you get him against Valson, and I think then the question becomes: do you trust the sophomore quarterback at Rockwall, or do you trust Drevon Ponder? And I think that's kind of be the difference of who wins that duel between those two. Because I know the receivers are going to do their job. But who is more consistent at the quarterback position? Because I think it could be a high-scoring game.
It will be.
It will be.
It will be. And the thing about Drevon Ponder is he's the guy that is coming in. Both of those quarterbacks are unknown,
right?
Because
they're Arlington
Bowie graduated a lot of talent also,
yes.
But they kind of retooled with the group now that we see has a lot of athletic ability.
All right, and now the game a lot of people are looking forward to tonight. Nick Harris heading out there right now. Frisco Lone Star at Highland Park, 7:30 tonight. You look at Frisco Lone Star put up 75 points last week against Denton High School in a 75-0 win. And you got to think there might be an opportunity for this Lone Star team to perhaps keep things close, maybe even pull off the upset. Highland Park's defense averaging about 560 yards given up per game so far.
Thanks to Braden Locke and Jackson Smith and Jiba week 1.
But we talked to Nick Harris. There is a young up-and-comer quarterback for this Lone Star team that might surprise some people. And then we already talked a little bit about Chandler Morris earlier today. But, guys, I want to open this up to everyone. This is a huge game tonight.
No, give it to Guy. Give it to Guy.
I'm gonna let you start.
All right, here we go.
And then I'll rebuttal.
Well, I got a question, right? And so 102 victories to 1 loss in 21 years, right? How is that? I mean, if as records go in any state, does anyone have a comparable home record to Highland Park? Period, in football? I mean, when I went through the years that they have been winning this game, I mean, literally, I understand you're not playing the Bad News Bears every week, right? There's got to be somebody that came close. Somebody.
Hey, Frisco Lone Star last year. Yeah. Well, I guess that was a road game.
That was a road game. I'm saying, like, when you look through all this, how do you maintain that? Because to me, in my mind, it boggles the mind how a team can have that kind of record. 102.
And I will say, growing up, one of my biggest, I'm a big Scotty guy, but at the same time, one of my biggest critiques was we've never really played in the hardest district ever, just by geography where we sit. Our district usually isn't the toughest. But I will say in recent years, our non-district schedule really has beefened up a little bit. So it's been an impressive feat for them to keep this going. They lost the one game to, Pulaski Academy out of Little Rock a couple years ago. So the home streak was finally snapped against just teams in general, but they keep this streak going against Texas schools, Denison being the last team to beat them. I think it was October 10th of 98. So it's an impressive streak.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And some of it, growing up, I think is it like a thing that they fear, like they don't want to be the class to let it up. I think there's some of that, but I think if you were to talk guys in the program, they're so focused on week to week, it's just not letting each other down that week.
Right.
So that's not really a thought. It's just going out and playing the next game. And I think that's a lot of it. That's a focus, I think, from the outside, but I think inside the program, they don't think about that a lot. As far as the streak being broken.
Yeah, I think the quarterbacks tonight is going to be another fun one. We saw Chandler Morris and a sophomore go toe-to-toe week 1, and that's Rockwell's sophomore, Braden Locke, that we've talked about. And Locke was great in that game. He was incredible. But the one mistake at the end of that game, who was it made by? It was made by the sophomore quarterback, Locke, late in that game. Mm-hmm. And I think you could see that again. I mean, Garrett Rangel's had an unbelievable year so far, bursted onto the scene. No one was expecting him to be great once the quarterback goes down. Rangel steps up as a sophomore, and last week they put up 65 points. I think they're going to need about 65 if they're going to win tonight at Highlander, and I think that's really the big thing. It's the second time in 3 weeks that we've seen a sophomore quarterback have to go toe-to-toe with Chandler Morris, and Chandler Morris got the better of the one in week 1 against Braden Locke, even though it was a heck of a matchup. How does Rangel step up tonight in a game where his team needs him more than ever? And we know that Flower or Lone Star has not really played a team of note at this point. So this is the first real test for this sophomore quarterback.
It's worth saying, but I think that the wild card to all this, because Lone Star does have such a great defense that is shutting guys out. They're beating who they're supposed to beat, but Prince Dorba, and even in the Rockwall game, came up big with that interception. That's what changed the game, literally, was that athletic play that he made at the line of scrimmage, which is impossible for a defensive lineman to do, get an interception at the line of scrimmage. And so I look for Prince Dorba to be the difference maker in this game, because he literally is due a 4 or 5 sack game, and he is that kid for Highland Park that can completely dominate and take over a game. I mean, look, it's going to be on both sides. It's going to be on both sides. I won't say who my pick is yet, but still.
Oh, we know who it's going to be.
And I'll piggyback on that real quick. I think 2 guys to look out for are Jack Curtis and Isaiah Pettick. They're 2 young dudes on the defensive line. Prince obviously gets the attention, but look out for those 2. I think they're going to be really important in trying to shake Rangel's head a little bit in this game. Young sophomore going into a hostile environment like Highlander.
All right, so we got about 4 games games left. We still have predictions after this, so these next 4, let's kind of blow through them. Here, Lancaster, South Grand Prairie.
Yeah, lots of athletes on the field in this game. There at the Gopher Bowl. That's a fun stadium to play in. Lancaster's got 5 seniors that are in the top 100 in the state, and they're led by their cornerback, Larondo Johnson. The dude's a freak show, 6'1", 190, 4.5 speed. He's going to LSU. I think Lancaster, they just got too much speed on defense. South Grand Prairie, better than they were last year. They had 10 out of 22 starters returning, but Drake Logan's not going to be able to do much against that the speed of Lancaster's defense.
All right, then we got Mansfield Lake Ridge versus Mansfield Timberview. There's a 6 and 5A teams right there.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an interesting game. I think Timberview is a team that's maybe being slept on in that district, 5A D1 that's in there with Lancaster and Highland Park. And I think you got a Lake Ridge team who graduated some key guys last year, but they've got guys like Keelan Johnson returning. Just to name one off the top of my head, that's my boy. He plays wide receiver. He's actually B.J. Johnson's son, the South Grand Prairie great. So,
okay.
Yeah.
That's a nugget.
Good bloodlines. Yeah. Yeah. Texas great too. But anyway, I think that's probably a slept-on game, and I think you'll learn a lot from both teams, especially Timberview if they're able to pull a win in that game.
All right, and then you have Mesquite Horn, Cedar Hill, 7:30 at Cedar Hill.
Well, I won't be taking Mesquite.
You're not taking Mesquite Horn this time?
No.
All right, very good. Moving on.
All right, South Oak Cliff, Wilmer, Hutchins. You got to look out the South Oak Cliff side. They've got a pretty good running game. Hutchins the third, 101 yards in the first 2 games, and then Wilmer, Hutchins. They got some good quarterbacks, a couple of good quarterbacks, 4 total passing touchdowns and 375 passing yards so far, and they like to run the ball as well. So that's going to be a good matchup. 7:30 at Wilmer Hutchins, South Oak Cliff and Wilmer Hutchins. All right, there we go. We got through it, and you guys survived the Highland Park Frisco Lone Star game. Coming up on the other.
One thing I got to say is that South Oak Cliff has definitely got to figure out South Oak Cliff has definitely got to figure out what they're going to do at quarterback. Last week versus Duncanville, they couldn't get anything going, and with all of the weapons that they have on offense with Cameron Davis, this kid is a freak show running back, and they couldn't get him off. And the one thing about any team that becomes one-dimensional, it makes it very simple for defensive coordinators. But they have this kid that played quarterback for them, Markevian Titus. And Markevian, that's a very unique name. It sounds like a body part. You know, I tore my Markevian. But either way.
You're going to be out for the season with that one.
It sounds pretty crucial if your name is Markevian Titus.
You got to have that Markevian.
Either you're a Spartan or it's a body part. But either way, the kid came in and he tried to put up some points for Hudson. But that's going to be the difference. I mean, is finding that quarterback that gets that offense running, because we know what Coach Jason Todd likes to do on defense. These guys are pretty stingy, but if you keep leaving them out there, they're going to give up a big play.
All right, so we're going to go right into predictions here as the first round of games are about to get started. First up, we have Prosper at Flower Mound. Give me Prosper. I like their defense.
I'll take Flower Mound. I think they a little bit of a revenge game for them. They got dominated last year. I like Blake Short, Pierce Hudgens. I think that's a great duo, and they're at home. So I don't feel super confident, but I'll go with the Jaguars.
Yeah, I'm going Flower Mound on this one.
Okay, so I'm going to speak for myself and Chuck this week, and we both agree that Flower Mound over Prosper, and I think I'll speak for him. I think Pierce Hudgens and Blake Shore are going to be the difference makers in this game. But watch out, Jake Majors on the O-line for Prosper, one of the better O-linemen in the country.
Big kid, man.
Big dude.
All right, and then the big game, 7:30, Frisco Lone Star at Highland Park. Highland Park almost unbeatable at home. I think the quarterback situation, Highland Park obviously has the advantage. Frisco Lone Star with the young quarterback coming in eventually will probably have a few miscues against that defense. Heckma, that you mentioned, Highland Park with the win, keep that win streak going.
I agree for all the reasons that you stated, and this is the first real matchup for Lone Star this year. I think Highland Park way too much. Chandler Morris, Randy Allen at home. Come on, Heckma.
Who you got?
Okay, so who do I have? I wonder.
Who you got?
Well, okay, this is not being a homer, but I really do think Highland Park's going to pull this one out, and I'll speak for Chuck on this as well. He's got Highland Park, and I will say I think I wouldn't be surprised if Lone Star pulls this off or even just keeps it close. And I think they're going to, but I think we're going to learn a lot about them. And I think this is actually a preview game of something we'll see later down the road in a regional final.
Now, who did Kyle Yeomans pick?
He had Lone Star.
Wow.
Oh, yeah,
really?
That's right. Yeomans did pick Lone Star.
Yeah,
So it looks like
Star.
Heckma and Yeomans are going to be the only two to do it.
Yep.
Man, did Chuck pick? Chuck picked
Highland Park.
HP.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna stay true to it, man. I'm telling you, the kids from Lone Star, they're due, and they're trying to put themselves on the map. They have the Cowboys high school coach of the year last year, and I believe in their defense. I think that they have enough. Last year, they should have won the game if it wasn't a downpour. But you know, I believe that they have the defense to do it. So I'm going Lone Star.
I like it.
All right, well, that would be very impressive right there, breaking the home winning streak there at Highland Park. Next, we have Mansfield at Mansfield Legacy. I like Legacy at home.
Yeah, give me Legacy. Mansfield just not a good football team.
Yeah, Legacy all day. Man, come
on. So speaking for Chuck and myself, we both actually have Mansfield, and I'll tell you why. I think Legacy's actually taken a big step back this year. They graduated basically the whole loot, and it was a really good class. But I think Mansfield. I'll take them. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You seem confident.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
There it is. I already got my pick.
All right, there we
Legacy.
go. Then we have South Lake Carroll. They're traveling out to Odessa Permian. It's going to be interesting. Maybe the travel starts or a slow start for South Lake with the traveling, but I do think eventually South Lake gets through with the win out there.
Yeah, we've seen South Lake get off to some slow starts, not only this year, but even dating back to last year, but their second half is always stellar. I think they're a much better team than Permian. The only thing that Permian has going for them is the fact that South Lake had to travel pretty far. So I'll take South Lake, just a better team.
Yeah, I think as far as the better coach team, I know that Premium they have a running style that is unmatched. They could commit to it as well. Not going to be a lot of passes thrown by that team, but I just believe that the Dragons have a defense that they showed last week versus the Colleyville Heritage, that they can shut you down. And with Clemson commit R.J. Mickens, I just believe they're very tough. So I'm going South Lake on that one.
And speaking for myself, Wolchuk, and Kyle, we all have South Lake. And I think Quinn Ewers, who really impressed me this past summer in 7-on-7, and he's just impressed in general. If you look back at his when he's been playing at the lower level, I think he's a really impressive kid at quarterback. Blake Smith at tight end for South Lake. I think they'll wake up eventually in that game. May not even be an issue. Coach Dodge, I actually saw him last night on the sideline at the Northwest game. I'm sure they'll be ready. And I think Permian as well, they graduated a lot of kids last year, so I think they're still trying to figure some stuff out. And I'm not sure this is going to be a year where mojo is mojo.
All right, now we have the Saturday special. St. John's coming in all the way from Washington, D.C. at Duncanville. You've got to go with Duncanville, not only just because Duncanville is such a great team, but really you look at some of these out-of-state teams that come into Texas, they get the first-hand experience of what Texas football is all about.
That's right. Bragging rights, man. This is a big one. I'm going Duncanville. I'm going with the home squad. There's no way I'm going to pick an out-of-state team, but I do think this is a huge challenge, and it's time for Jaquindon Jackson. First two games of the year, he hasn't really had to do much because they've dominated. I think this is one of those games where let's see Jaquindon Jackson step up. Let's see him not only on the ground, but through the air. I'll take Duncanville.
Yeah, so speaking for myself and the other two as well, Wolchuk and Kyle, we've all got Duncanville. I think this is a game where Duncanville can really put their stamp on the national scene for high school football. And it reminds me a lot of the Cedar Hill Bishop Gorman game when Tate Martell came in, and Bishop Gorman kind of ran over Cedar Hill in that game. It also reminds me of Miami Northwestern when they played South Lake in 2007. If you look at both of those games, the out-of-state team won. Now, I'm picking Duncanville. I'm going to represent the state, but I think this is very similar game in that you get two really top programs on a national scene going up against each other. It's a big opportunity for the Panthers.
Yeah, when earlier, I was really confident about this game until the guy from the old coach came in here and started talking about guys going to LSU and Georgia and all of that. So that kind of planted a seed of doubt in my head there. But I really believe that that Galena North Shore game is still lingering for the Panthers. I think anytime they have a bad outing, they go back and they think about, we almost had it, and we have to clean up a lot of it. And I think this is their first test that they get. This is a team that is formidable. But Jaquindon Jackson is a beast, a dog, a problem, a goon and goblin. I love him. And I think he's going to be all that the Panthers need. Like you say, they want to put themselves on the national stage. They know that this is the kind of game that they have to win to be able to say, we're Duncanville and we're ranked all over. So I'm going with the Panthers, not just because I'm from Texas, but because I think they're the better team.
All right, and then another Saturday special, DeSoto at Bishop Dunn. I like DeSoto in this one.
Man, this is going to be a really, really good game. I will take DeSoto as well. I think Samari Collier at quarterback, I think he's sort of the reason why I like the DeSoto offense much more than the Dunn offense. But both teams on both sides of the ball, athletes, speed galore. But I will take DeSoto because I think their offense has the ability to make the one or two plays that are necessary to win a game like this.
Yeah, this is tomorrow. I am so happy to be able to be PA in this game at Sprague Stadium. So it has a lot of sentimental value.
Oh, heck yeah. So you're not allowed to make the pick here because we don't need a bias
Are you Herb
PA
Street on game
guy.
day? Just not gonna make a
Look,
pick?
man, everybody in the stadium will be able to hear the voice of God tomorrow.
I'm jealous. I'm going to make the trek out there.
I want to have a good time, but Samari Collier is just too tough, and I think that Bishop Dunn going up and facing DeSoto is going to be a big test for him. But the speed of DeSoto, it's just going to be too much tomorrow.
And speaking for me, Kyle, and Chuck, we've all got DeSoto. I think it's an interesting game. I think Dunn, unfortunately, sometime in the summer, a bunch of guys left. You got the Holby brothers who went back to Timberview. You've got Eli Yelverton, who's over at TC Cedar Hill now. So they had some guys leave, but then they had Alex Orgy come in from Rockwall. And he's playing he wanted to play quarterback. I'm not sure if he is. I think I can't think of his first name, but Evans, the quarterback at Dunn, I think has actually been the guy that's got the starting job. The one thing I worry about, and I don't think this will be as close of a game as maybe people think, is Dunn's depth in that game. I think DeSoto has a lot more.
Absolutely.
And I think Collier, and then you look at guys like Lawrence Arnold at receiver. Those are different type of athletes. I like Brennan Scott and some of those guys on Dunn's defense, but I think with the guys leaving Dunn in the offseason, unfortunately, I think it kind of took some of the sting out of this game. So I guess the one thing I'll look for is depth for them. If they can show they have the depth, and they can hang with a team like that. But I'll take DeSoto, and so is the two other guys.
All right, we'll see who ends up on top after week 3. Before we sign off here, it's time for the Friday Night Stars Rewind. We have this week a Saxe alumni. They play Plano East tonight, but for the rewind, we'll go back to Devin Dervany, who is now a wide receiver at the University of Texas. Guy, we'll turn it over to you for this week's rewind.
Yeah, so this week's rewind is Devin Duvernay, who's a University of Texas stud and a former Saxe guy. He's a 4-star wide receiver in his time in high school.
What a game last week.
What a game, right?
I thought it was Quan Cosby. Did anybody else think it was Quan Cosby?
I did.
Running around?
Yeah. So he was an Under Armour All-American in 2016. He was a 2-time All-State and 3-time All-District honoree in his 3 years as a starter. He compiled 170 receptions for close to 3,000 yards and 36 touchdowns during his time in high school. But let's fast forward a little bit to last week, where he had 12 catches for 154 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. A little tidbit is he had 11 of those catches in the second half and actually set a school record for receptions in a single half. He looked a lot like Quan last week, running with a real tough style. He actually claimed in the offseason that he's the fastest guy in the Big 12. I believe it from a straight line speed angle.
CeeDee Lamb says hello.
Well, and that's why, CeeDee's really shifty and good in breaking and changing direction. I think from a straight line standpoint, I might give the nod to Devin, but he also runs with such just a power to him for his body.
Thick,
so he's
man.
5'11",
He's not the kind of guy you
built
want to
like
tackle.
a house.
He is not your typical little skinny slot receiver.
So he was the Big 12 co-offensive player of the week with Denzel Mims from Baylor, who's a Dangerfield guy. And another thing is he's Kyler Murray's cousin. So good lineage as well. It seems to be kind of a trend in this
How do you put all this together, man, with cousins and brothers and dads
family
and all
tree,
this,
bro.
Ancestry.com. And he's got a brother, Donovan, who's on the team. He's a reserve DB down at Texas. So, they were actually Baylor signees, and then when the whole scandal happened at Baylor, they were both able to get out of their intent with the school, and they actually transferred on down to Texas.
Okay.
So, a little tidbit.
Duvernay, what a luxurious name!
All right, thank you very much, Guy. That's this week's
Bust
Friday
open a
Night
bottle of
Stars
Duvernay when I get home.
Rewind, and that'll do it for the pregame show. Make sure to tune back in at 9 o'clock for Friday Night Stars Overtime. For Guy Frazier, Eric Giafalo, and Heckma Harrison, thanks for tuning in as we will take a look live at Lake Dallas and Frisco Reedy here at the Star.